All right, man. Well, let's kick this. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the former Action Guys podcast, Miles Vining. I appreciate you reached out to me on Instagram. You're writing a book, or you wrote a book actually, getting ready to come out. I'll let you talk about that here in just a minute. But so you reached out to me on Instagram and let me know, kind of a little bit of your background and stuff like that. And I totally encourage people to do that. It's funny because people don't want to reach out because they feel like it's being braggadocious to say something, but at the same time, there's definitely a lot of people out there that want to get their story recorded. And so if you're one of those people out there, feel free to reach out. It may take me a minute to respond back just because I get a lot of messages, but I will definitely respond back like I did with you. And so thank you for coming on the show, man. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you're from and why you joined the Marine Corps.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Justin. I really appreciate you having me on here. It's a real honor, especially after seeing your previous lineup of guys that you've talked to. It's like, man, I can't really stack my chips next to any of them.
Hey, man, everybody's got a story, man.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So, with me, where I'm from is always an oddball question because I was born in Washington, D.C., but my father worked for State Department. So we lived in Southeast Asia, and I lived in Thailand, Burma, and Malaysia for 15 years of my life. And then I moved to the U.S. for boarding school in Philadelphia, and then I enlisted out of Philly, went to Fort Dix for MEPS, and go ahead.
In that 15 years that you were living overseas, how often did you come to the U.S.?
We would come about every year in the summer. So sort of summer vacation. We'd go back to the U.S., see family and friends and stuff like that, but then go right back, to school overseas.
Did it feel weird to call yourself an American then, as a kid? Like, did it mess with your head at all? Like, well, I'm an American, but I don't live there.
Yeah, it was very like I was definitely a TCN, a third world, third culture kid. And like, growing up, there was that sort of like, what am I? Like, I'm a mutt. Like, I speak Thai, I eat Thai food, I have Thai friends, I love Thailand to this day, but my passport doesn't, say that kind of thing. And I think it was definitely a point of contention when I was in because, like you get in and people would be like, you're not like, like make fun of it and be like, oh, you're not even American. And I'd be like, oh, you're right, but wrong. But I don't know, actually.
Fuck you, man.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what? So, but yeah, no,
go ahead.
No, that was it.
I was going to say, but what an interesting like life experience though. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody's life is different. Everybody's life experiences are different. But to say that you've lived in a different country for most of your life, or countries for most of your life, and you speak another language and stuff like that, and I know like we can kind of, I guess the similarity to that would be some of the people that come from south of the border and stuff like that. However, I think it's even more so, like even more different, just because you're on the other side of the world, and the Asian cultures are completely different than a lot of the stuff that we do over here. At what point did you like really learn about the Marines then?
So I was like, my fascination sort of with the military started from a really early age. When I was in, I don't know, 6, 7 years old, I'd always have this interest in the military in general. And I mean, it was down to like Civil War, Revolutionary War, War for American Independence, playing with toy soldiers. And, that was always there. It actually, to be honest, it wasn't a why. It was more of a reality. It was like, there was no question in my mind of like what I was interested in and what I wanted to do. It was just the question was really just where I wanted to go in that specific context.
Yeah.
Do I still have you? I think I lost you for a second.
No, I got you fine. Yeah, no, can you hear me?
Yes, I think I lost you for a second there.
Oh yeah, no, I have you totally fine. I didn't lose you at all. No, that's really interesting, man. I think that's I kind of feel the same way just because I was raised as like my dad was in the Army and stuff like that, and I had family members in the military and stuff like that. So it was like one of those. I played with the little green army men. I watched the old army movies on TV and stuff, and I think I always was kind of going towards the military. It was kind of one of those, like you said, not a if he's going to do it, but how, when kind of deal. And
yeah.
The only thing that really shifted for me was going from wanting to be in the Army to being in the Marines.
Yeah, so for me it was, yeah, no, I know exactly as you're saying, it wasn't it the only question was, well, either Army Infantry or Marine Corps. And so for me, something that I want to point out, and especially with my book that I have here, so from I don't know the way my sort of perspective on life, I'm always interested in the experience, whatever that is, whether that's, whatever the perspective of the experience is. I'm not interested in this sort of like lofty perspective of this and that. It's like I want to know the truth on the ground, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was growing up and I was reading accounts of warfare and military history, I was never interested in the officer side, the leadership side, the grandiose strategy side, the sort of like what was Patton's army went here and this army did that. That wasn't interesting
Mm-hmm.
to me. I was interested in that that dude on the ground, in it, every day, dying,
Yep.
fighting, that in the mud, so to speak. Like that's the guy that I was fascinated by, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to know how that guy felt. So all the books I read were all these first-person accounts of warfare and fighting, and I was also interested in the officer side, but from that perspective of what was that first lieutenant feeling, what was that captain look going through, what was it like to wake up at 6 in the morning at Gettysburg and be like, we're all going to die today, I was interested in that. So when that comes down to the military, the first question was, what MOS, what branch? I was infantry, absolutely. That's what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fight. That's it right there. But then I wanted, and I had an opportunity to go to be commissioned. I had an opportunity to go to college, to go to NROTC. I applied to several colleges, and I got into several, and I could have gone through ROTC stuff, but I was still from that perspective of, no, I want to be, that lowly guy in the totem pole, and I want to see it from that point of view.
Yeah.
Kind of how are you familiar with Band of Brothers? With there's that one character who wrote a book called Parachute Infantry.
I don't think
Webster,
I've read that book.
Daniel Webster. He's in the
Okay.
series, right? And he's
Mm-hmm.
and he's this guy that was like Harvard educated, Second World War, but he could have easily commissioned, but he was like, no, I don't want to commission. I want to be in it with the boys, kind of thing. That's kind of
Yeah.
the perspective that I wanted to take, and that's kind of led me to joining the infantry and enlisting, in that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because there's a lot of people that assume one that only like the poor or the uneducated and stuff like that join the military, and then two, even more so that stigma falls on the enlisted side. And I think I've talked about it before on my podcast. And one of my first platoon sergeants I had was an infantryman. I was a mechanic when I first came in, but I got pulled to go do a project. And I had an infantryman that was my platoon sergeant. And this dude had an electrical engineering degree
Yeah.
and had worked and for a little bit and was like, dude, this sucks. Like, I just want to join the military and do something exciting for 4 years. And then, we'll see what happens. I want to go live life. And I point to guys like that, and I don't know I don't know what has happened the last few years about people talking about Marines eating crayons, but I don't get it. I think it's hot. I kind of laugh at it, but I'm like, okay, it's funny, whatever. But at the same time, I'm like, you guys are like perpetuating the stigma that we're all morons and stuff like that. Why not? And what kills me about it is the Marine Corps is like the second hardest branch to get into. Like it's harder. The only one that's harder is the Air Force, and that's because they're extremely strict on like any kind of legal stuff and stuff like that. But compared to the Navy and the Army, you have to graduate high school to join the Marine Corps. You have to have certain things done that to join the Marine Corps, and but we portray ourselves as these like knuckle dragging like morons. And to a point, some of us are. Let's be honest. We've all worked with those Marines. But that's, I don't know. I hate that stigma. But I do. You're right. The wanting to know what it was like to be in the suck, is kind of a driving force for a lot of people. You see you see these movies and you read these books, and it's like the suffering and stuff is almost romanticized, and I don't know. It's one of those things that you have to experience to understand it, I guess, to understand what it's like to have that shared misery with other people. And that's not necessarily combat either. That could be a shitty field op where you've been sitting in the rain for, a long, long period of time and it's cold out. Like that shared misery is just something that really bonds guys. And it's you see it in movies like Band of Brothers and stuff, the camaraderie and stuff, but that to actually see it in real life is something else, and the understanding of what the people on the ground going through is definitely something I can relate to. It's I'm sure you've read, or maybe you haven't. Have you read the book? Was it Give Me Tomorrow?
No, I haven't.
I think it's Give Me Tomorrow. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really good book. It's about the Korean War, and the cover of it, man, is just it's a picture of a guy in the Korean War, and the journalist that was there, the war reporter that was there, snapped his photo, and he's just like, you could tell he's miserable. He's like wrapped up in his blanket, and he's like looks up at the camera, and he shot the photo, and he asked him, and he's like, if you could have any one thing, what would it be? And he just said, give me tomorrow. And that's like the basis of the book. And it's really powerful, man. And it's like I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about, I could never imagine what it was like to be in the Korean War, where my buddies are dying and then freezing. And then they're, I don't know, people that haven't read about the Korean War really should. They talk about how guys fall and die and they freeze very quickly because it was so cold, and then when they would have to transport their bodies, how they'd have to break their bones and stuff to flatten them out, so that they could actually transport the dead bodies. It's just horrific stuff. But anyway, that was a long tangent to say, I understand what you're saying, that shared misery, that misery on the ground is something that drives a lot of us to want to kind of be there and figure out what it was all about.
Yeah, no, it was a big part. It was a big aspect in me wanting specifically to be Marine infantry, and not looking elsewhere and stuff. And it was and it was just, it's weird. Like going back to earlier, like people say, "Oh, why the military?" It's like there was no why. There was the reality. I did not sit there and be like, "Well, I could go to college and I could do this." I could go with this. I could still join. I could have this cush job, in the Air Force or something. It's like, no, there was none of that. There was none of that thought process. It was like, no, I'm going to be in the infantry. I'm going to enlist, kind of thing. I don't know.
What year did you join?
2010.
2010. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're in that, the same range as me. Like I joined in 2006. I wanted to join right after September 11th happened. I was a senior, and that was the first time I went to the recruiter. It was right after that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like one of those, like, I felt like I needed to hurry up and get in, or I was going to miss out on the war that was going on.
20 years of
and I'm sure,
never-ending war later.
Yeah, and I'm sure you felt a similar thing kind of deal, with your kind of passion.
I did, and there were guys who did commission, and they did go in. They went to college. They went to the college route, and they did commission in my peer group from high school. And a lot of them went in, they got in like 2014. And, I think they did kind of miss out. They didn't, if they had gone in at the point that I went in, they would have been able to see, well, they would have been able to been on some more combat deployments and, possibly like that. But they sort of waited and they did their thing. We'll never know. I mean, and talking about like betting for the future, right? One of my buddies, I found out, he went in as a chemical officer in the Army in 2010, and he wanted to branch as chemical officer because he saw all this stuff in Syria going on, and he was like, oh, well, there's probably going to be an NBC aspect of this conflict. I should go chemical, and I'll be able to get in on that. And it's like, talk about game in the game, man. It's like, dude, not only did you not go to Syria, but there was no, like, chemical aspect to the fighting there in terms of U.S.
not
forces
that we were
deployed.
involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, that is two flip sides of the coin, right? And me, I wanted to go in right there, and then my buddy was like, I'm going to get the up on this. I'm going to go chemical and NBC. It's like, nah, man, you gamed it too much. I don't know.
So for someone that kind of studied and read, and you were kind of all about the military growing up and stuff, what was it like for you? It's got to be different. I mean, for me, it was the same. It was I knew what I was doing. I knew that it was a special moment to go to boot camp and to graduate boot camp. I knew these things were like, I'd read stories about historical figures going to Parris Island. I'd read these stories, and like now I'm one of these people that are walking through those doors. What was it like for you to be that, for that to actually happen? Like, holy shit, it's happening.
I think there was it was like half of it. There was this sort of mysticism of like, wow, the yellow footprints. I've only ever read about these. Oh, wow. Like the sand fleas. Wait, there are no sand fleas. Where are these sand fleas? And when I went in the summer of 2010, I don't think like there was no sand fleas, and there was like
There
one
were none
time.
in 2006 either.
Yeah, and I was like, like sitting on like one time we were doing like this PT thing, and the sand fleas were bad for like 20 minutes, but that was it. And I was like, I got gypped out of this experience of the sand fleas. I've read about all these sand fleas all the time, and it was kind of like very anticlimactic in that aspect. But I mean, other than that, I'd say there was a part of it that was like, wow, like Marine Corps history, legend, Jesse Puller, Yellow Footprints. But then on the other side of it was the reality of like, this is also just another experience that everyone goes through. Like there's actually nothing romantic about this. You're getting trained, you're getting hazed, you're getting IT, da 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 da. It's like, yeah, it's very real, it's very versatile, and this sort of the books and the movies sort of pump it up as usual kind of thing. But I would say there's like those two aspects of it, I think.
Yeah, 100%. So I did ask about the sand fleas because I was also like, I thought this was going to be worse. It's not that bad.
Yeah,
Apparently, in the summertime, it's not bad because it's too hot.
yeah,
That's when, and then you have to worry mostly about the fire ants and shit. I guess it's like in the fall and the spring and the wintertime when it's cooler off is when the sand fleas really come out.
yeah.
So I can't say that I'm upset that I missed out on that experience, but everything else. So you went to Paris Island. So you went to SOI on the East Coast then?
Yes, Lejeune.
Okay.
Well, no, Geiger.
Yeah,
SOI
Camp
East.
Geiger.
Yeah.
I haven't had a infantryman on in a little bit, or at least an enlisted guy. So you want to just kind of talk about your experience at SOI and stuff like that. And I think you're probably one of the more recent graduates I've had on within the last 10 years. So I have listeners that are guys that aren't in the military yet, that are like high schoolers and stuff that are thinking about it. So you can give them kind of an idea of what to expect if they go in the infantry and what they'll learn at SOI.
Well, SOI in 2010 in when did I go? September or October of 2010 was when I went. I mean, SOI was, a far cry from boot camp. It was, you actually have libo. It's more of like you just start settling into that standardized format, and it's a reverse shock. Like boot camp, you're like shocked, like jumping into cold water, like boom,
Mm-hmm.
drill instructors in your face and stuff. But then SOI, it's the reverse. It's like you're coming out of cold water and like stepping out onto like a semi nice beach kind of thing. It's like, things are becoming kind of normal again. I mean, it's not like, yeah, people are still yelling at you. And it's like all the sergeants or the staff sergeants, the instructors are like, run faster and stuff. But you're kind of like, yeah, like I can work with this. And you settle into that school format and you're recovering from that boot camp phase. And then you're coming to light doing SOI. And then, just going through the classes and you're learning everything. And I think it's really interesting from an individual perspective of seeing that like, okay, now I'm learning my trade craft. I'm learning, how to set up a machine gun, and now I'm learning how to do mount or how to set up a fighting hole. And boot camp, there's none of that. It's just this is a fighting hole. This is your rifle. This is how you shoot 500 meters. And it's like, okay, good. Next thing, move, move, move. And there's no one's taking the time to explain. It's like, okay, this is a fire plan. This is why we set it up and stuff, and you sort of learn the trade craft of being in the infantry, and that you have a lot more respect for it in that way. It's not just thrown at you and saying do this, do that. It's like, no, do this because your sector of fire needs to tie in, with third team on the right and second team on the left. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's, I don't know, my description of SOI for that period.
Yeah, I know what you're saying about boot camp too. I thought there would be like combat training and stuff in boot camp. Like I thought that was a thing, and then obviously going to boot camp, I found out it's all marching and getting hazed, and and you get a small period where you go to the rifle range and everybody kind of backs off a little bit, and then it's that's
Yeah.
about it, and then on to your next thing. Yeah. So for SOI, when you're going through, aren't you working with everybody for a little bit for like the first like couple weeks, and then you guys split off in your individual specialties?
Yes, so we did, I think the first 3 weeks or two, no, it must have been like, yeah, half of SOR the first 2 weeks. Yeah, we're all together and we're doing everything together, machine guns and stuff. It doesn't matter, you're all together. And then you branch off. And some
Mm-hmm.
guys, I forgot, like most picked what they wanted. And then some guys got, drawn off to the sides and we all split. And then that was a very definitive split between machine gunners and mortarmen and stuff. Do I still
Y-
have you here? I've got a
Yeah,
connection
you're
loss on my
frozen,
end.
but I have you. You're frozen. I still have you. Let's just keep going though. I'm sure it'll unfreeze. If not, we can stop in a minute and like restart the connection. I hate to break
Do
the
I still have
connection
you,
if we don't have
Justin?
to. Then there we go. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I
I
got
still
you.
got you. Okay, cool.
Yeah, you're back up
But
now.
but
Go ahead.
But yeah, no, you just split, and then the machine gunners do their thing, and then the mortarmen do their thing, and you make fun of them, and you sort of and then you come back together for the field ops and the exercises and the marches, and it's like, okay, we're all hiking together now. But I mean, you're still so new, and you're still just such a boot. I mean, it's like you're like, well, what's a machine? Like, I don't know what to make of a machine gun. I don't know what to make of a mortar, and you're still judging yourself. Well, should I have been this? Should I have been that kind of thing? Um, yeah, yeah. I don't know.
So you came through a time where you probably had a lot of your instructors were probably combat veterans, right?
Yeah, I would definitely say that was a huge, huge thing. I mean, every SOI instructor, all the staff, even the corporals. Like we had corporals who were instructing us, and even they were like, three deployment, four deployment, Fallujah guys. And I remember we had one guy because we all knew we were going to Afghanistan, and we had one guy who was with like 1.6 or 3.6. I think it was a 3.6 in Marja, and he came in and he
Mm.
was talking about like pulling guys out of wadis that were blown to bits and from IEDs, and it's like he would use that, and he would when he would get angry at us and be like you idiots need to pay attention to this or else you're going to be like pulling your dead buddies out of stuff, and we were like, whoa, like okay, yeah, this is for real. But it was like not only were they instructing the doctrine, but they were also instructing their experience, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. And that I think
Mm-hmm.
was like holy crap, talking about how valuable that instruction was because they were saying, well, this is the doctrinal way, this is the textbook way to go on a patrol, but let me tell you how it really happens in country, and let me tell you what combat is really like in terms of this regard. And I think that was invaluable looking back on it now. I mean, I don't know what that experience would have been if it had just been pure doctrinal and like, hey guys, this is a textbook, way to set up a defense. By the way, we've never done this for real. So to kind of take our word for it kind of thing. So that was
Yeah,
interesting.
I've talked about that before. Also, just where the institutional knowledge is being purged. People are either deciding to get out, like they did their time, they did their 4 years, and they're like, "Hey, that was cool. That's all I wanted to do." People like me, I did 12 years and got out, and I was like, "All right, I did 12. It isn't what I want it to be anymore, so I'm going to move along. Like, there's better things I can be doing with my life." And then there are guys that just weren't allowed to re-enlist for one reason or another. Personally, I know one guy who was with 3.6 during the Marja deployment, and who was like a straight war dog with like Valor awards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't let him re-enlist because he failed on recruiting duty. He was a recruiter during the surge,
Yeah.
so I guess there was like a lot of pressure on the recruiters, and he didn't make his numbers a couple times. And so because he got kicked off recruiting duty, he was unable to re-enlist, even though he had letters literally from, I think he had a letter from a brigadier general saying that
Wow.
this was a good dude and stuff like that, and the board still wouldn't let him re-enlist as an O3. And I was like, dude, guys kicking a guy out that is like probably one of your top infantrymen, one of your top dudes who could be, even if he's not in a line unit, he could be at a schoolhouse teaching his experiences and stuff like that. Teaching, why relearn these, go over these same mistakes over and over again when you can have someone like that continue to spread the knowledge. But the big machine of the military doesn't care about that, and it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's got to be tough for guys now where they're getting instruction from people that have never actually done it, like you said. And have you ever actually set this up before? Have you ever done this in person? And I don't know. But on the other hand, you can't keep wars going on forever just so that we have experience and we
Yeah.
have good knowledge.
And I think you bring up a good point there. And I mean, for me, it's like to the point now where I'm running into infantrymen now and I'm talking with them, and it's like, I don't know how to connect with you, man. It's like you've been on these UDPs and these Mews, and I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
that's like. Like I did Afghanistan twice and I loved it, and like I did what I signed up for. Like I don't know what it's like to sit on a ship other than 2 weeks on Fleet Week, which was amazing. But I don't know what it's like to do that for like
Mm-hmm.
6 months at a time. Like this whole traditional Marine Corps amphibious ships and stuff. It's like that's great. I don't know anything about it, you know.
It's
But
miserable. My audience knows.
yeah, um, yeah, I can sure. But I think you bring up something interesting there, the sort of the loss of institutional knowledge, right? And people, and I think I always hear people talk about this, like, just like we're talking, like, we lose this institutional knowledge, we lose, all the combat veteran experience, because guys get out and they do these various things. And I hear the same thing from battalions because it's like, okay, we're going to Afghanistan. We only had like 5 guys who were deployed before, and that was it for the whole battalion. We were pretty much a boot battalion because we had done a MEU or something, whatever. But this idea of like you have to have people in to have this passed on kind of thing, and it's interesting how it should be explored because it's like these are inevitable things. It's like you can't get away from losing guys to warfare. So saying something like, well, we didn't have any of the veterans left over from before, so we didn't know what going into combat was like. And it was like, yeah, but this is a reality. Guys are going to get out. Like the question
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be how do we keep guys in to teach us about this, but I feel like the question should be how do we take their lessons and really implement them so when they do leave, we won't be at a loss. Because the reverse argument is like, well, we didn't have any more, SOI instructors that had combat
Mm-hmm.
deployments. Now we don't know anything. I don't know. There's no right or wrong answer, and it's
I
just interesting.
I think that's how the whole AAR process is supposed to be, the after action review process, where you sit down with the key leaders and key people from your unit after an exercise or deployment or whatever, and you go over these things. And every unit does it. I will say also, having been involved in multiple of those, there's a lot of whitewashing of what is actually occurring just to make the unit look better and to, so that the commander can get that next rank, because that's, they're trying, it's just like any other job. They're trying to get that next promotion as well. And we give ourselves a little bit more credit sometimes than I think we're due. And I think we're also harder on ourselves sometimes more so than, we should be. I don't know, man. It's tough. The AAR process is supposed to be what that is, but I think people don't take it seriously, and I think a lot of people kind of bullshit some of it just to make their section or their unit look better than what was real, the actual case.
That's a good no. That's a very good point that you have there with the AAR, and I almost wonder if it's like the Marine Corps Historical Division should be doing a better job. And we have the opportunity. Think about this: guys come back from deployment. You have the opportunity. You could interview every guy in that battalion, and they don't need to write a book, But if you got like 20 pages of solid interviews from everyone and was like, what worked, what didn't, how many firefights were you in, how many were successful, how many failed, how many casualties did you have, got all these stats, about equipment, figures, all this stuff, like. That would be a sort of effective AAR in that regard. But we don't do that. Like it's kind of you come back, maybe people talk about it, but that's it. It just gets lost.
The other thing too is how many people are reading those. How many units the unit that you're ripping out with, like the unit that's coming in to replace you, will probably read your AAR, or they'll look at your draft version as you're making it because they want to know what they're walking into.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like who's unless someone's doing like a historical paper or something like that, or they want to do some kind of research, that's the only time something like that's going to get pulled up. I don't know, man. The institutional knowledge is it's important. There's got to be a way to retain some of it. But what good is our institutional knowledge from Afghanistan in 2020? To be honest,
Exactly.
like now we're pivoting to Japan. We're pivoting to the Pacific. What good is knowing how to walk the road and singing without getting blown up? How's that going to help me if I'm, possibly fighting on Guam against a Chinese, enemy?
Exactly.
So
No, and I think the specifics like get lose their value, but I think maybe some of the overall things like okay, how do you solve a problem? In saying it in 2011 they had this problem and this was their solution. And if you can, if you're a wise man and you can take from that, like, okay, that's how they solved it. How can we apply that? Like, that might be more of it, but I don't know. I don't know the answer to these questions.
You know what? It's funny. I just thought of this. My buddy, I'm looking away from the camera right now because I'm looking at my bookshelf to see if I have it up there. My buddy asked me the other day about the guidebook for Marines. Someone had shown him one, and he sent me a picture of it, and it was from like the 80s or something like that. He's like, "Did you guys still get these?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah." I was like, dude, I think I still have mine. And I like walked over to my bookshelf and found it on the bookshelf, took a photo of it and sent it back to him.
Yeah.
And I flipped through it. And that's the first time I flipped through it in, I mean, over a decade. It's got to be, right? You know?
Yeah.
And it's the one from boot camp too. I guess, honestly, that should be a lot of our knowledge for like your tactical level stuff, like how to be an infantryman, how to like survive on the land as an infantryman, because the strategic stuff's going to change. Like the big picture stuff's going to change.
Yeah.
A lot of things are going to change. Technology is going to change, but
I think I lost you. Yeah, but
nah,
yeah,
man.
absolutely.
You heard me? You got me?
Yes.
Okay, I haven't lost you at all the whole time, so I'm not sure. I think maybe something like that needs to be updated more, or they actually should have people read it, because I think I got that in boot camp, but we never actually read it. Like it was just one of those things you had. You know, it's part of this. Here, it's in the C bag. I flipped through it. You know, I'm sure everyone flipped through it at some point, but I don't know, man. Who knows? Who knows what we should do there? But let's move on from like the philosophy of that, and let's kind of talk about after SOI. What unit did you get assigned to? And when you were at that point, how does that work in SOI? Do they tell you guys, like, are there units you're trying to go to? Like, you really want to go to this unit and stuff like that? Are there pros and cons to some, or were you just didn't care?
There was no choice as far as I remember. No choice whatsoever. It wasn't like you get to go here, you get to go there. The 8th and I guys and security force guys, they had a choice, because the 8th and I guys, actually, the recruiter came through at 8th and I and was like, if anybody who's like tall and, like muscular and handsome, like if you want to go 8th and I, come with me. And those guys had a choice. And then the security guys had a choice, because they, that was in the contract. And then the recon guys had their separate thing. I don't even remember any recon contracts, to be absolutely honest. But for the rest of us, all of my class went either to 1-9 or to 1-3. No, it was 2-3. I think no, it was either 1-3 or 2-3. I forget now. But they went to one of those Hawaii units, and my first vivid memory of like what 1st Battalion 9th Marines was this kid in our class named Perry. And Perry was a stud. He was like, super PT stud. He was a good guy. He PT'd really well. He ran out, knew his stuff very well. But he was like, I remember Perry saying, apparently we're all going to die, because we're going to this unit called 1st Battalion 9th Marines, and they're known as the Walking Dead. So we're all going to die in Afghanistan. And I was like, oh, well, that's great.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about 1-9 prior to that. Funnily, incidentally enough, I'd read, the previous 1-9 Medal of Honor recipient, Fox in the Vietnam War. I forgot his first name, Wesley Fox, not Wesley Fox.
Oh, Colonel Fox, yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, so he was in 1-9 when he did that. But the battalion didn't mean anything to me when I was reading it as a kid, because there was all these weird jumble of numbers, 28, 19, 36, whatever, But then we heard about 1-9, and we're all going to 1-9, and we're like, okay, we really don't have a choice in the matter. Like, here we go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. For those that don't know, they gained that reputation, The Walking Dead, during Vietnam, where like they're overwhelmingly high casualty rate, and then the unit was disbanded for a while because we didn't need them, and then we brought it back because we plussed up the Marine Corps to infantry battalion. So 9th Marines got brought back, specifically 1-9 got brought back, and then I think they've gone away again. I think they've folded up their flag again.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah, no. So we've got, we have an interesting history in that respect. I mean, we were formed in the Second World War, fought in Vietnam, lost our colors in Vietnam, so to speak, because of the bad casualty rate, specifically Operation Dewey Canyon or Operation Buffalo, I recall, in like the summer of '67. And then lost our colors, so 1-9, 3-9, and 2-9 kind of split. 1-9 went to Pendleton, and the others went elsewhere. And then we completely deactivated in the early 90s, only to reactivate. And the story about how 1-9 got reactivated was originally 1-9 was this thing called the Fleet Anti-Terrorism Company, which you probably know of from your era, in 2007 or 8. And it was supposed to be this like infantry company that could, that was deploying and filling gaps in Iraq, but eventually whole 9th Reds just came back. And I think 2007 or 8 was when, definitely 2007, 9th Marine Regiment came back under 1, 2, and 3-9. and we were always split up. So at Lejeune, we fell, I mean, 19 fell under 8th Reg, we fell under 6th Reg. The other two
Mm-hmm.
battalions, they fell under different regiments at times. So we were never a complete regiment. And then we deployed, 19 specifically deployed, deployed as a company for the Fleet Anti-Terrorism Company, whatever that was. Then the nucleus of that formed the battalion, and it actually formed Alpha 19. And then the whole battalion deployed to Ramadi, and you'll know us from Ramadi because we had Lance Corporal Jordan Harder, who was the Medal of Honor, no, Native Cross recipient. He's the guy that stopped, the oncoming VBID with Jonathan Yale when they ripped his first couple days in country, and the VBID comes in, they just open up on it, and boom. So Harder was one of our guys there. And then we deployed again on a MEU after Ramadi. And then that was when I came in, was between the MEU and between the first Afghan deployment in 2011. So when I came in, it was like all these MEU guys, and all my seniors just like, I don't, like, part of that was like they kind of took it out on us. They were kind of frustrated. They got a MEU instead of a combat deployment. So they were like, they took their hazing out on us, and they're like, rah, like, you boots, like, but it's funny because like we check in as boots, and like we're just getting, our crap pounded out of us in the barracks rooms and field ops, and we're getting hazed day and night, and we're living, in fear of leaving our barracks rooms and stuff. But we kind of come,
That's funny.
Yeah, but we kind of come to the realization, it's like, wait, none of these guys have been on a combat deployment. Like, what are they? Who are they to tell us, like, get ready for combat? It's like, yeah, but are you ready for combat? Like,
Oh man,
like we weren't gonna say that kind of thing.
I was gonna say, I hope none of you guys actually ever said that.
No, I know. Actually, one guy did. He did. We were at Fort Pickett at not IPBC. It was one of the live fire ranges at Fort Pickett. And this boot from our SOI class actually said that. He said specifically in the field, he was like, oh man, I'm so happy we're going to Afghanistan instead of going, getting a combat deployment, going to Afghanistan instead of going on a MEU. And one of the seniors was like, wait, what did you say? And they beat him up in the tree line. And all of our boots were like, oh crap, do you hear what Heindel said? We're like, yeah, he said that. We were like, man, why did he say that? He's an idiot. Why would you say that, man? You're an idiot, Like, you just are like, we beat you up ourselves too. It's like, you're an idiot. So.
That's funny. The funny thing is I interviewed someone the other day, I can't remember which one it was, but or a couple weeks ago, and they were saying how the MEU is what everybody was trying to get. There were no combat deployments. This was in between wars. This was like, there was nothing really going on. So it was like the UDP and the MEU is where you were going to get to actually go do stuff and actually get to do more than some field problems over here at Camp Lejeune and the pine trees. You're actually going to get to go do other things. And then it's funny how it flipped. The war started, then everybody wanted to go to the wars. Well, the MEUs were still there. Those still had to be manned and staffed. And the guys, like you said, that got sent on those MEUs were pretty butthurt about having gone and done that and missing out. They felt like they missed out on Afghanistan and Iraq. And, it's an interesting thing because I know a lot of guys that have issues after the military solely for the fact that they never got to go to combat. Mm-hmm. Not that they have PTSD because they did crazy stuff and all this crazy stuff happened, but because they never got to get in the game. It was like a lot of them feel like they wasted 4 years of their lives, or they've never actually, they were never tested, so they don't know, whatever. And it's just it sucks, man. It sucks for those guys. And I actually knew a kid who was a mechanic, with me. And he did 4 years from 05 to 09, like during the height of everything, and never got to deploy. Yeah. And this, he was he was getting ready to deploy. He made it to the point where he got back from post-deployment leave one time for deployment. And they're like, hey, we have too many people, man. You're not going now. And they left him back.
Wow.
And he never got a deployment, and it's just, I don't know. It's just a weird thing how at one point MEUs were the thing that people wanted to do, and now it's like, and I think it's actually back to that now. I think people are like, oh shit, yeah, we get to go do a MEU. I'm tired of sitting at Camp Pendleton or Camp Lejeune or whatever. So
yeah, and I think even more than MEUs right now, from what I'm hearing from guys in the fleet, is the sort of the special mission stuff that's happening in Australia.
Oh, the special purpose MAGTF.
Yeah, training in Australia or training in Rota or Black Sea rotation. And I mean the guys in I ran into them in Syria. The guys in the special forces MAGTF in Rota, their weapons company was supporting special operations in Rojava in Syria. So they're, they do get these like opportunities to jump out and do stuff. And I think that's
Hmm.
where the current fleet guys are like eyeing, like, how can I get on, like that's the hot new thing, so to speak, or, go down to
Yeah,
Australia. Yeah.
that's your best chance of getting something cool to happen. Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's 100% true. My second MEU, we sent in the first Marine artillery units to Syria to support the push through. What's the dam there?
Hadith, well,
There's a
not the Euphrates River Dam or outside of
Yeah, there's
Raqqa.
the major dam they were afraid ISIS was gonna like
Tabqa.
try to destroy, and it was gonna flood the whole Euphrates
Yeah.
River Valley. Yeah, the Hopka Dam.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. Yeah,
So
no, I know what you're talking about. It's the Euphrates River Dam. You there?
yeah.
I just lost you for a second.
No, yeah,
Okay.
I'm here. But yeah, so
Okay.
like for those guys, that was an awesome opportunity for them. We got to send in an Anglico team from that as well. One of our firepower control teams got to go in and help support that and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, I get it. But if you do go on a MEU and you don't get to do something like that, then you walk away from it kind of bitter, like I did.
Yeah,
But
I got
it
you,
is what
man.
it is. When you got to the fleet, though, you obviously know history because you read a lot about the military and stuff like that. Did your unit really push your own unit's history? Was that like a thing you learned, like the legacy of Ninth Marines?
It was from, I mean, the Walking Dead thing. Yeah, everyone knew about that. Everyone knew about the
Yeah.
Vietnam connection. And it was a thing. It wasn't pushed. It wasn't like, Depot Chet. Like, there's an example, right? Because so in Vietnamese, the phrase for Walking Dead is Depot Chet. And it's actually, so side note, my uncle was he worked for this program called the Cords program in Vietnam. Very interesting
Hmm.
civil military partnership working at the village level. And he actually married his translator, who was a Vietnamese woman, his translator, and she's in the U.S. So my uncle's side of the family is half Vietnamese. And I once went up to her, to Hoa, and I was like, "Hey, Hoa, what does a depot chet mean in Vietnamese?" And she looks at me like a ghost, and she's like, "Whoa, you don't want to be called that, man. Like that means that you're dead and you're walking." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." But like the look on her face of like a native Vietnamese speaker, being, "Oh, you don't want to be labeled Tipo Chet." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I shouldn't tell you my whole battalion is labeled that."
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was like we knew the Walking Dead thing was it wasn't huge, but it was definitely there. Absolutely. I mean, we got commemorative pistols with Depot Chet on them. On the second
Cool.
deployment, we got like challenge coins with it. Our battalion commander would say that stuff. I mean, he tried rallying us. Like one of his motivational things was like at formations, he would be like, well, actually, he would be like walking, like he would say walking, and we would say dead. He'd be like walking dead, walking dead. And another caveat off of that was one of my buddies, David Fenn. I remember so vividly one time he pointed out, he's like, I like how we've got the dead part and he's got the walking part. And sure enough, Fenn, about 4 or 5 months after that, Fenn himself was killed in the mortar accident that we had in Hawthorne, Nevada, when the mortar
Oh
flew
man.
up there and killed 7 guys. Fenn was on the gun team,
Fuck
next to
man.
that gun team. Yeah, and dude, that's like seared in my memory when Fenn was like, "I like how we have the dead part and he has the walking part." So I mean, it was just these weird ways that the Walking Dead sort of come back to us and talk. We learn about our unit's history that way. But it was definitely, it was definitely there. It was definitely present.
Yeah, that's cool. That's it though. I mean, little things like that is what keeps those it becomes tradition, and it becomes, the unit. That becomes what the unit's all about. And a unit like that, because of its distinction, unfortunate distinction, it has a very good, from what I've seen, it has a very good like a group of people. There's like I know there's an association and stuff like that, and it seems like they're more active than a lot of other, I don't want to say random infantry units, because every infantry unit has its legacy, and it's, the stories from its own time and stuff like that. But theirs is obviously one that stands out a little bit more. And it seems like this, from what I've seen online and stuff like that, they just seem more active in the whole Walking Dead thing. So,
You know what?
um,
Yeah, no,
go
no,
ahead.
I'll agree with you because it's like, it's a moniker that sticks and it really does stick because people are like,
Hmm.
"Oh, what battalion with 19? Oh, the Walking Dead." Or we run into Vietnam guys like, "Oh, you're with 19. Ah, or other Vietnam Marines." It's like, "Oh, you're in 19. like and I've had Marines say like, yeah, when I was in Vietnam, the joke was that when you went to 19, they gave you your check-in papers and a Purple Heart because they were like, you're all gonna die or get wounded. We'll just give you this ahead of
Jeez.
time, kind of thing. So yeah, stuff like that sticks out, and I think it sticks out more than other infantry units from Vietnam or from Korea or from elsewhere. It's like I don't think like 2.8 guys or 1.6 guys. I don't think they have that connection, from today and then. But what I want to know is I want to see like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I want to see like 3.6 or 1.6 Marines, run into Marja veterans and be like, oh, 1.6, like, wow, that was a hard unit, man. Like, or 3.5
Yeah.
insane. It's like that kind of where those reputations take those guys now. Because we didn't establish that in Afghanistan. I mean, we were like any other infantry unit, where there's nothing special about what we did as opposed to, the sixes and the twos and the fives and stuff.
It's
Um,
funny how we refer to them like that. How long? So the incident that happened that you were talking about, did that happen before your first deployment, or was that like in between deployments? Because I
it,
want to talk about that, but I want to kind of go in sequential order here.
yeah, it was between. It was because we deployed 2011, and then we again 13 to 14, and Hawthorne was March 18th, 2013.
Okay, so
Yeah,
let's back up real quick and talk about you finding out about your first deployment coming up. What was that like for you? They're like, "Hey, man, it's time. We're going to Afghanistan. This is where we're going. This is what we're doing." Can you kind of explain what that was like for you? Like, what year it was, what rank you were, and what your role was within your unit?
yeah. I was. It was an interesting time for one particular reason because it was. I got to the fleet in November of 2010. Checked in. We instantly knew we were going to Afghanistan. I mean, we were pretty sure of it in SOI, but it was like the first night we checked in the 19. It was like, no, we're going to Afghanistan. Like that was what the seniors started hazing us with. That was their opening line. Like, listen
Mm-hmm.
here, like bitches, like you're just boots all over again. Like we're gonna deploy, on a combat deployment. And of course, we're later on and we're realizing, wait, but you've never been on a combat deployment. So who are you to tell me? I don't know. So yeah, there's that aspect, and we instantly knew. I was a PFC. I'd gotten meritoriously promoted in SOI, and my particular position, I was an M27 gunner when I hit the fleet, and that was really cool because it exposed me to this whole side of the Marine Corps weapons procurement with M27. And
Mm-hmm.
what I liked about that is that led me down the line when I got into gun writing and writing about small arms. I had like it was amazing. I had this front side view to all the development about the M27, and I was learning about it later as like a writer and a researcher and getting more into depth about it. And I had this perspective on it that other people did not have whatsoever. It's like I was there from seeing it the initial rate production. I was there when the full rate production got in. And when I got out, I saw the developments in the program and where it is today. So that was really
Mm-hmm.
cool, but just from a very like technical nerdy point of view of like, oh, the H&K on 27. What can I tell you about it?
Can you want to explain what that is, what that gun is, and what it was doing, like the replacement and all that?
Yeah, it was, and this is the thing about the M27 program. It's so much drama wrapped up into it. There's like congressional inquiry, and there's corruption between HK and Syscom, and at the fleet level and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
even like the point of it, it was supposed to be, it was supposed to replace the SAW. It was supposed to be, the idea was a lighter, more accurate squad level light machine gun that was in the guise of an M16A4, M4 that
Mm-hmm.
so saw gunners weren't getting picked off on by snipers in country, and it was because then one of the requirements was that it originated from, well, we need better PID. In country where our saws aren't accurate enough, and we're shooting at guys, that are running around. We're not shooting at, area targets of like enemy squads or fire teams. No, we're shooting at single targets that are shooting at us. So we need to be able to return fire, in a better, more effective, and more accurate way. And so then 27 program came out, and Colt, LWRC, and FN Herschel all competed for it, and FN Herschel lost it, and they were really butthurt about it because they really thought they had something with their entry that was called the Hammer 16, and Heckler and Koch won out. and they submitted a modified version of their 416. And people will tell you that the M27 is basically a 416, and it is, but there's also a number of differences. I mean, things
Mm-hmm.
like the gas port has been enlarged, it has a bayonet stud, it has a number of different small features where no, they're not completely the same rifles. But so it came in. 19 was the one of the initial low rate LRP, low rate production issuance. One of the battalions to get it. It was 19. I think it was 1913, first LAR. It was one of the West Coast units, and then it was one of the reserve units. I think 325 or something. And all five of these infantry units were deploying within a year of each other. And the idea was to produce about 400 of these rifles, give them out to these units, replace the saws with them, and then send them out within 1 year. User experience, then order the full production, which would equip the entire fleet. So every line company in the reserves and the fleet and active duty component would have them 27 in place of their saw.
Yeah.
Are you there? I got you.
Yeah.
I've got
Yeah,
you
I'm
lost
still
on
here.
my
I
end.
lost your video, but I still got your voice. Yeah. You can go ahead.
You're there.
Yeah, I got you, man. Yeah, you froze
Oh,
for a
okay.
minute.
I got
Your
lost.
picture did, but I heard all the audio, so you can continue on.
Okay, cool. So, and I mean, so later on, it got the full production version came in about 2012, and we had it in 2011. And we got this rifle, and I was an IR guy for my squad, and I was designated IR. So we ditched the saw, and we got this thing. So there's another sort of like Paris Island sand flea experience that I missed out on because I, kept on hearing about the saw and the saw is so heavy and it jams and belt fed and blah 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 blah, and it's like I get to the fleet and I don't even get the saw. It's like, come on, I just get gypped out of all these like traditional experiences, right?
Yeah.
Um,
How did you guys flex though? Because the saw, for those that don't know, for our non-military people or people outside of the Marine Corps, the saw gunner is your automatic rifleman within the fire team. How do you replace a saw gunner who has a belt-fed weapon that can carry hundreds of rounds with someone that's carrying a 30-round magazine?
and I'll t-
What were you guys doing to make that replacement and that fit work?
and I'll tell you the dirty secret that the Marine Corps doesn't like tell people or people don't realize is that we didn't. We never got rid of the saw. The
Yeah.
saw never left the battalions. It simply got
Mm-hmm.
reallocated to the weapons platoons. And the idea
Mm.
was that the machine gunners were going to pick up the 240 and the saw. So now the saw is them. But the reality of the matter was that the saw never left. So company commanders and the platoon commanders always had the saw capability, and they did use it. On the first deployment and the second deployment, guys still brought out saws. It wasn't as
Yeah.
much as them 27s, but they still used the saw. So the people ask, well, how do you replace this with that? And the answer is we didn't replace this with that. We simply augmented this with that. It never left.
Yeah.
It still has never left. The saw is still in the weapons platoons to this day. So
Yeah.
it's like, and that's the crazy drama thing about them 27. It's like, what is this, man? Is it a DM rifle? Is it a thing to replace the saw? Is it a thing to augment the saw? Is it a way? Is it a backdoor sleazy way to get for the Marine Corps to get more accurate and more reliable M16 platforms into the infantry by circumventing the standard process of because we can't replace them 4, we can't replace them 16 and 4, so we'll do this weird back route where we'll adopt this M27 to say it replaces the saw, so we'll get the funding for it, but then it never replaces the saw, it just augments it, and then at the same time have this weird thing going on where you have engineers, Marines from Syscom getting out and immediately starting to work at Heckler and Koch on the M27 programs. And then at the same time, Congress is yelling at Syscom and saying, are you freaking kidding me? You're paying $2,000 more for one of these rifles that is essentially the same thing as an M4. It's just, a little bit beefed up, and you're paying $2,000 more. And right after that, HK lowers the price by $2,000. So it's just,
Oh, really?
yeah, it's this crazy drama with the whole thing. And it's like, then we start putting suppressors on it, and then now it's in the form of an M38. It's actually a designated marksman rifle at the squad level. So now we have a 5.56 DM, which the gun is extremely accurate. It's one of the most accurate squad level weapons that we have. That's in 5.56. It's amazingly accurate. It is more reliable than M16, but it doesn't provide the firepower of the saw. And this is the problem in that And then you have all these like gunners who are like stepping on top of each other, and they're all trying to advance their careers and trying to be like, and this is why the M27 has the name 27, because one of the gunners who first proposed this idea, he was the gunner of 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, and that's why it's called
Oh,
27.
really?
Yeah. So
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah,
What?
yeah, I know. So it's just like the
There's a
more,
lot of people listening like, what?
yeah,
Everyone, that's
and
crazy.
yeah, and the more you dive into this thing, the more you're like, wait, what? What is this?
So
Is this a drama? Is this theatrics, or is this the Marine
aren't they
Corps?
aren't they now considering, or maybe they're doing it, I'm not sure, weren't they taught, because I know they were talking about just replacing all the infantry rifles now with M27s.
Yes.
Like now everyone's going to be carrying an M27. So and I
Yes.
know that's what you were kind of getting to.
Yes.
Has that ever happened? Do you know what the status of that is?
You there? I think I
Yeah,
lost you
yeah,
again.
yeah. No, I haven't lost you at all, man.
Oops.
I'm saying, have you? Do you know what the status of that is? Did that occur? All right, I did lose you on that one. So, gotcha.
Making this work. We're making this work. Okay, so no,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to answer your
So,
question, no, so to answer your question, yes, that's a thing, and that was there in the very beginning. That was there in the very beginning. One of these conspiracy theories about we're going to replace the entire M4, M16 inventory with M27s, and that was part of the conspiracy theory that this is like the backdoor way for the Marine Corps to phase out the M16 M4s and replace them with M27. Meanwhile, like not to throw another freaking wrench in here, but at the same time, Syscom was doing all this with M27. I believe it was like the 2111s or 2112s with the precision marksmanship section. They came up with their own commercial off-the-shelf solution that was just as good, if not better, than the M27, using standard M4 components and off-the-shelf stuff like Geisley triggers, free-floating barrels, and handguards, Geisley handguards, and stuff like that. So they came
mhm.
up with a cost-effective solution that did the same thing as the M27, but it just wasn't an HK. It wasn't a purpose-built thing. So no,
And
you're
it didn't have that
100%
government contract.
exactly, and it wasn't $2,000 more than
That's
an M4.
that's the stuff that you see in the while you're in the military, and you're like, government waste is crazy. And that's why people like me, at least, I'm like, when I hear people talking about wanting to grow a government sector, they need more regulators, they need more whatever, more bureaucracy added in. I'm like, dude, you don't understand the headache you're asking for, the wasted time, money, all this shit. I kind of know what you were talking about. So when I first got to the fleet as a mechanic, my unit didn't like me very much when I showed up because I was 22. I've talked about this. I was 22. My platoon sergeant, I remember I was married when I got there, and he was like, "Hey, are you living out in town or are you living on base?" And I was like, "I'm gonna live on base."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Make sure you have one of your corporals go and buy furniture and stuff with you, so you don't." And I'm like, "No offense, Sergeant, but I'm older than you and my corporals." I was like, and I've been living on my own for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And but what happened is because of that conversation, they didn't really like me very much because they're like, this fucking dude.
Yeah.
They sent me to go work on the EFSS program, which was the Expeditionary Fire Support System, and the ITV, the Internally Transportable Vehicle, and how that little Jeep-looking thing would pull the 120 millimeter mortar. And
I was literally just going to say the 120 millimeter mortar Jeep thing that looked cool in advertisements, but I never saw it in person. Like, this is great for me to find out about this thing.
So I was the lead mechanic on it for the second part of the testing. For the first test phase, I was just a new boot mechanic, and I was one of 3 guys out there working on it. But I'll tell you what, man, that truck gets a lot of hate from people, and there are definitely some issues with it. And we were not only working on it, but we were fabricating stuff. We were like, oh, hey, we're gonna add this to the turret, so now we got to make these. So we would make this shit.
Yeah.
And I just remember working on that vehicle and going, hey, man, this is a great vehicle. It goes all over the place. I've driven it in Alaska. I've driven it through the swamps in North Carolina. I've seen them roll over in 4 feet of water, get winched back over, keep driving. I've seen one roll over in Bridgeport, and keep going, which isn't good that all these vehicles are rolling over, but and what I'm saying is it's a durable vehicle. However, like I told the guys as a mechanic, I was like, this isn't marine proof. I was like, you got to come in, turn this on. You're talking about a vehicle that's got airbag suspension. You can steer the rear wheels and the front wheels independently. You can do all this different. It's got like Willwood disc racing brakes on it. I think it had like Fox, like, you know, suspension, like this like professional suspension. And I'm like, this is all cool and stuff. I was like, but your average Marine is gonna fuck this up. It needs to. You need to be able to come over here and turn this on and then just drive it. Like now you have to turn on the blanket warmer to heat up the block and all this other bullshit. Like, and what I'm getting at is that vehicle is 150 grand, you know, for that little Jeep thing, and now they're done away with now, and they're using the UTVs, which do the exact same thing for like way, way, way less. And I'll say that being part of that program, one, I was proud of being part of that program. I thought it was cool. I thought it was a new thing. I was a PFC when I first jumped on it. So I didn't, I don't know anything. I'm just there happy to, for me, not be at maintenance battalion turning wrenches. I was like, we're going to the field? You're going to let me shoot machine guns? Like I got to do all this cool stuff. Yeah. And, but seeing the procurement process, talking to the guys from Marcor Syscom, talking to the guys from what's the other? There's another thing too that where they Makatia, the Marine Corps
or something, or logistics.
Yeah, agency. It's like it's Makatia and Marine Corps Syscom, and they work together, but they have to work separately because of the whole contracts and stuff like that. And same deal with the rifles. There was investigations about, hey, the guy that was running this program is a retired colonel. Is this whole program because he was favoritism and all this other shit. And we actually had investigators come down and interview us what we thought about the vehicle and all this other stuff going on. So I understand that whole process, and I understand, like, even me at the time going, man, this thing cost 150 grand. Like that's our best option. And knowing that you could go and buy something or make something of your own for so much cheaper. So yeah, it's people on the outside don't see that, man, and the problem with it is the bureaucracy in the military won't allow you to continue doing like what those guys did. Go build an off-the-shelf rifle. Like, I'm just going to go buy the parts off the internet and make something that's just as good or not better than what the government contract has. And it's just not an acceptable way to do it because, I guess the defense industry aren't getting their cut or something like that. But I know exactly what you're saying with that.
Yeah. And it was so, and but no, yeah. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about the M27. It was just such a weird, hybrid, like conspiracy-fueled, like program.
Did you like it though? Did you like the rifle?
It's an amazing rifle. It's a great rifle. Yeah. When I took it to IPBC in Fort Pickett, I was hitting targets out to 700 meters, like without even trying. Like it's not even funny how accurate it was. In terms of cleaning, the thing was amazing to clean. You barely had to clean it. There was one part on it you had to clean. You had to clean the gas piston head, and that was it. It was the cleanest rifle you ever cleaned in the Marine Corps. I mean, it's like everyone else is like, finger banging their star chamber and stuff, and you're like, yeah, I don't even need to touch that, dude. It was an amazing rifle. It was a great rifle for what it was, but for what we wanted it to do and what the Marine Corps wanted it to do, that's a different issue.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of, and also another thing that it caused too was, for a little bit, they placed a ban on people using aftermarket magazines. Yeah, PMags, because they wouldn't fit in the mag well of that rifle. Yep. And so they were like, hey, no longer. And there were units that actually used their unit funds to purchase their entire unit PMags, before that and stuff like that. You'd see guys that had those, and now it became something like, now we're discarding like our better magazines, our better options, so that we can continue to use this one rifle. I don't know. It's a crazy world,
So actually, I'll tell you, the whole magazine thing was interesting because it was like a doctrinal thing, right? Like nobody knew what to do because it was issued with 20, like, I can't even say this with a straight face. It was issued with 21 Stanax, okay?
20, oh, really?
Yeah, 21 30-round, aluminum magazines. Steel magazines that had the bright brown followers. And it was such a weird conundrum because it was like 21 magazines what am I going to do with 21 magazines, man? Like,
Yeah.
what am I going to do with it? Like, put it in my backpack and just like have a feed system coming out of it? Like, where am I going to
Mm-hmm.
put my 21 magazines? And it was an
Mm-hmm.
actual conundrum, and no one knew what to do with it. So the M27 guys were like, we were loading up. Like, I had like, I wore 14 magazines on my belt, on my battle belt. I had seven on one side. No, no, no. I had six on one side, six on the other, and then I had 13. I had a 13th one in my gun. And it was
That's
like,
crazy.
yeah, you were loaded down. And at that point, the saw is actually carrying less weight in terms of just ammunition allotment.
Because it's just the ammo, not the mag weight too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly, right. So
That's crazy.
and then the other thing was with the PMag. I quickly found out that like if you took the PMag and you filed down the front of the PMag, it would work in the M27, and it worked for me, and I did it. But here's the problem: now that PMag doesn't work in anything else. So it's
Yeah.
like I've got this great PMag that works in my M27, but doesn't work in anybody else in my squad, and I can't use it in any other rifle. And then the Syscom captain that was actually explaining the weapon system to us was actually like, yeah, like some of these StatAg magazines are like, they're really tight fit in the magazine well. So what you got to do is you got to like, and I'm not even making this up. This was like actual guidance from Syscom, but you got to like take your magazine and like file it down on some concrete like outside your barracks, and then like that's how you make it work.
They go to work. It'll be
Um,
fun. Like, oh, this
so
is the
that it
stuff
was
that we're
just
paying
like,
thousands of dollars
the
for, huh?
magazine thing was a whole conundrum as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's crazy, man.
One
Can you?
second, I got a connection at this point.
What's that? Can you hear me?
I got a connection. Yeah, I hear you now. I got a connection issue there, but I'm good now.
Okay, yeah. Sorry for the people listening. We're real spotty today. Can you kind of talk about now? You know, going to Afghanistan. Where were you guys headed to? What was your mission going to be? And then, what was it like for you?
So we went to a district of Helmand Province called Nawa District. Nawa, for those who don't know, it's north of the district of Garmsir, which is in the south, and is north of the fob of a big fob called Geronimo and another one called Jaker. And it's just south of Marja, and it's just south of Lashkar. In fact, the northern tip of Nawa butts to the provincial capital of Lashkar, which is the capital of Helmand Province. And our mission was a very, very bread and butter, very, very stereotypical infantry company mission for Helmand Province in 2011. I mean, there was no, I mean, it was, we fanned out to patrol bases and PBs and combat outposts and FOBs and stuff like that. And the mission was to work with partnered forces, work with the Afghan Uniformed Police, work with the Afghan National Army, and assist them in bringing security and run stability patrols and really go on these either dismounted or mounted patrols in various areas, either walking from our PB or doing an op somewhere else by helo or doing it mounted and then dismounted somewhere. And really just go on these long dismounted foot patrols and take biometrics, talk to people, have KLEs, work with the partnered forces, go to areas we hadn't been to before. By that time, we had the bat and hide system, and we would use that, and take biometrics all over, set up snap VCPs. It was a very, I would say, it was a very stereotypical. It was the stereotypical quintessential Marine Infantry Company mission of 2011 that many other battalions were doing.
And this was the summer of 2011, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, summer 2011, and we came back in December of 2011.
I know we briefly mentioned it when we were talking, we're messaging each other and stuff like that. But I was there at the same time with 3-6, and we actually had Alpha 19 attached to our battalion. Our battalion, I don't know. So for the people aren't aware, Marja in 2010, 3-6 was there for the push. It was like 3-6, 1-6. I want to say 1-3. Like I feel bad forgetting all the units. I know 3rd Marines was there. Matt Ketting, one of my guests that had come on before, talks about his time there because they were in the northern part of Marja. LAR, took part in that. We had RD down in Fiddler's Green in the southeastern portion of Marja. The following year, there was 3-6. There was a whole push through Marja, Then the follow-on deployment, there was another deployment after that where they kind of, okay, the push into Mars is all done. They're just kind of figuring it out, trying to get the area settled, get the markets back open and shit like that. And then our deployment, you would have been there with 1.9, me with 3.6. I came in, and the whole point of during Marjo, there was like a plus up. There was a huge surge at that point, and then we came as that was kind of trailing off. So now that gap has to be filled. Our battalion, normally you'd have, your 3 line companies and your weapons company that breaks up to support those line companies. We actually had our 3 line companies. Our weapons company had their own AO, and we had Alpha 19 attached to us, and we had Charlie 16 attached to us. So we were plussed up pretty heavily in that area. So, and you guys were off to our east and southeast, I believe. I think you guys were east of Fiddler's Green, correct?
Yes, north and east and north of Fiddler's Green, because Fiddler's Green is out by Geronimo, and our furthest for Charlie Company, our furthest southern PB was south of east of Fiddler's Green, and our furthest northern one was, I think, my patrol base. No, it wasn't. No, I stand corrected. It was north of us, a PB called Spingar, which was weapons company, had that. And from Spingar, if you patrolled a little bit north of Spingar, you could actually see the rooftops and the city of Lashkar, which we never went to, but it was there. We got all the traffic going to and from Lashkar in that northern part of Nawa district.
Didn't you guys have the Brits to your north as well?
There were Brits as well. There were Brits. I never saw a British platoon. I saw their vehicles every now and then, but we had these weird British provincial reconstruction teams. There's a British PRT that would come through and they stayed at our patrol base a couple times. It was single guys here and there, but not too many. I did way more with the British on the second deployment in 2013.
Okay.
Working with the Paras, the Parachute Regiment, and their version of Human and stuff like that.
Yeah, I know. So I didn't mean integrated. I know you might not have known. You were down at the company level. At the time, I was at the battalion. I was the fires chief, so I was obviously aware of everything that was going on, in the surrounding areas as well. So I think to your north, you guys had the 5th Scots was there for a little bit, and then I think they ripped out it was the Royal Marines were there, and then they ripped out with 5th Scots, and then I think that was just north of Geronimo and stuff. I never made it over to Geronimo in that area. I heard they had a nice chow hall and stuff.
We called it Camp Cupcake. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the only place out in the middle of nowhere that had ice cream and stuff you could get, I guess. That's why guys would come back from there and tell us about it. But obviously that's completely different probably than your living conditions. What was the living condition for an infantryman in 2011 in Nawa?
Honestly, I loved it.
Yeah.
We were at a partner patrol base called Loy Calais, which means big village in Pashto. And we were with between 20 to 30 Afghan uniformed police, so the AUP guys. And our platoon split in 2, actually more like 3. A bunch of us, so half of the platoon was at Loy Calais. The other half of the platoon was at patrol base Mamakan, which was across Shriner from us. And they were a small little squad outpost there, and they worked with ANA. And then the rest of our platoon kind of got augmented into other patrol bases and at Camp Jaker, and then at Fob Jaker. And then at the end of the deployment, we all came back together. We all formed 3rd platoon again. However, the patrol base we were at, so we were a 2 squad, I would say we were a squad plus. We were about 15 guys. And we had our dog handler who was attached to us, who was actually from weapons platoon in Charlie Company. And then we had a contractor guy who was, what was he? He was an LEO. He was a law enforcement.
The LEP.
The LEP. That was him. Yeah. So
law enforcement professionals.
Yeah, that guy. His name was Randy. He was a cool dude. He was with us, and then we had our Lieutenant Buck. And then we had another sergeant who was attached to us, and then we had our interpreters, and that was it. And to be honest, I loved it. It was it was a concrete little patrol base. In this compound, we had there were three buildings and two guard towers, two guard posts, two entrances, one to the north, one to the south, with a serpentine to the north that no one ever used. Everyone just drove around the serpentine to get in. And then there were three buildings in it. One building was sort of a joint COC for both us and the AUP guys. And then we had our building, which was where we slept, and it was a squad bay kind of thing. And we slept on cots, and later we got bunk beds in. And then the AUP had their building all off to themselves, and they had their mats and bunk beds and stuff in there. And we had a fuel point. We had our own shitter that was out behind. We had a burn pit that was outside. We had to burn the shitter every couple days. Then we had our own generator, so there was air conditioning that did work. Most of the time it worked. Sometimes it would fail. COC didn't have it. It was really just our squad bay that had it. We built our own little jailhouse gym like halfway through the deployment. And then at the very end, like the last 2 or 3 weeks, so the last month of the deployment, we actually got satellite internet in.
Oh, cool.
Which was like crazy, because we went from this super austere nothing at the beginning with a sat phone that broke down every 3 or 4 times we used it, and then we go to like satellite internet at the end, which was pretty neat. It was a very welcome creature comfort at the end of the deployment.
Isn't that a weird? So we had that in 2013. They have a thing called a Cheetah, and it's like a little satellite system that's how they run the internet. And normally you get one of those for like a company or a platoon to run. And when I was there in 13, I was in Sangin as a Afghan advisor. The advisor team before us somehow scammed their way into getting their own Cheetah system and set up Wi-Fi in our little, what we called them Habs is what we lived in. They're little like HESCO bunkers kind of deal. And no one on the camp knew that we had our own like Wi-Fi, and we could get on and surf the internet. But I mean, tell me what it was like for you. But for me, it was almost too connected with back in the real world. Like being able to just like, hey, I'm going to Skype my mom real quick, like on demand, anytime I want. Yeah. I think that is a good thing for people to have, but I also see the problem with that because now in 2000 and when we were there in 2011, this time frame we were there, same deal. I didn't have internet. I had internet on my computer inside the command center inside the COC that I worked on, but I didn't have like regular. It was a government computer, so I didn't have regular internet. And in Iraq, when I was there in 2009, we could go to the phone center or something like that and call back home. And I thought that not having that communication was better because you can focus on the task at hand. You know what I'm saying? And this is me in 2009 and 2011 where I wasn't in any kind of like in 2011, the most high pressure stuff I was doing strikes, but they were all from the command center. I wasn't out doing patrolling daily or anything like that. And even then, like I felt like knowing what's going on back home, like the minutia of the drama back home is just takes you away from like the job at hand, and it's risky. And that was kind of and even when I had internet, and tell me what you think about this, even when I had really good internet, I would tell my family I couldn't get a hold of them because I couldn't get online or something. I would lie to them and say I couldn't get online because I didn't want to make it a habit of calling. I knew people that made it like every week I'm going to call. I'm going to do this, or every 3 days I'm calling. And I'm like, bro, what happens when you go on an operation for a week and no one hears from you? They're going to think the worst. So, I mean, what's your take on that? Like, it is a nice creature comfort, like you said, but there's the downside of that as well.
I agree with you 1,000% at the beginning. I think like at the beginning of that deployment, like no internet. The only internet we had was when we would do our supply runs back to Jaker or to Geronimo, and we would actually make it a point to sort of cycle guys out. So it wasn't the same guys going to Jaker and Geronimo because we had to go once a week to pick up fresh food and that kind of thing. So we actually made it a point to cycle guys out. So everyone would get their chance at a Jacob run, and you would get your chance, jump on the internet and check some emails and stuff. But when we were at the patrol base, we only had a sat phone, and honestly, I think the sat phone that was good enough. It was perfect actually, because it was like get on the sat phone, call back. I was in a very serious relationship at that time. And I mean, I talked to my girlfriend more than my parents. But I mean, that was perfect. That was enough. Like, get on the sat phone. Hey, what's up? I'm doing good. What's happening? Okay, bye. Boom. And that was it. That was all that was necessary. You don't need anything more than that. To be absolutely honest, you don't need to be on your freaking Facebook. You don't need to know what the latest thing that's going back home. And no, you're absolutely right. It was, it takes away from the mission. And it's like focus on the mission kind of thing. Um, and not to jump to the second deployment, but I will juxtapose this with on the second deployment. It was this very weird environment to be in because we were on Leatherneck and we were running helo ops and we were running security patrols around Leatherneck, and we would it was this weird situation where you would go on a patrol or you do a helo op and you'd get shot at, and other guys would get hit or other guys would die, and you'd be in this very real serious combat scenario, like combat. And then you'd go back to Leatherneck and you would get in a hot shower, take your thing and, jump on Skype, and you'd be FaceTiming people from your air conditioned rack in your little comics box after you worked out at a nice gym and after you had, a fantastic meal in which you could gorge yourself. And it was like, it was I was talking to one of my friends and he was like, that almost sounds like the B-17 crews from the Second World War, who they would have all the creature comforts and amazing, awesome lifestyle being in England, but then they'd go do these crazy high-risk bombing missions over Germany and get blown out of the sky and shot down. And then they'd come back and be like, well, Joe didn't make it on that mission. Well, how about I just, go to Piccadilly and, go on a date with this girl or whatever, and it kind of felt like that in a way. And it was
and you could do that. And you could go on dates at Leatherneck too. Leatherneck is like the global war on terrorism light. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm fighting a war, but I also don't want to get rid of my lattes. I don't have the opportunity to get a nice coffee at the end of the day.
And I dated a British girl while she was working at Bastion, like while I was in between like combat patrols. Like,
did you take her to that blue steakhouse?
I think
there was like a restaurant there.
Yeah, that's one of the first dates we went on.
People that have never been to Leatherneck can't imagine, but I mean, and this is not to disparage anyone that did their time in Afghanistan at Leatherneck, but to say that a deployment to Leatherneck is like going to like a patrol base in Marja or Sangin or something like that is completely different, because Leatherneck has the creature comforts like you were talking about, literally restaurants. There's like an Italian, I mean, and because it was an international base too, like the other half of it was run by the British, and you had like all the different NATO countries over there. There were literally like restaurants from around the world you could go and try. There were multiple coffee shops. There was probably 5 chow halls on that base, like massive chow halls with like primo food too. I mean, I remember coming back to Leatherneck and just being like, oh my God, look at this food, because in Marja, something happened. I don't know what happened, but we got stuck where we had first strike meals. I don't know if you've ever had a first strike.
Yeah, we had first strikes in UGR.
Dude, we had the first strike meals for a month straight. That's all we had to eat. And for those that don't know what a first strike is, it is like, if you know what an MRE is, a meal ready to eat, it's a bagged meal, but the first strike is a big clear bag, and your entire day's worth of food is supposed to be in that one bag. The thing about it is, it's just like literally all bread. It's like all carbs and just like garbage. And there's only 2 types. So you have a chicken one and you have a tuna one. And a bunch of all the other shit's all kind of the same. And to eat the same 2 things over and over again every day for a month, man, I was losing my fucking mind, And then I get to Leatherneck and they're like, oh, hey, it's hibachi night, or not hibachi. What was it? You know what I'm talking about. They have all these like special nights for food and stuff.
And weird stuff. Oh, well, yeah, the chow halls and that kind of thing. You know what I think was funny about the first strikes is me and everyone else I know, you only ate, like there's like 6 food options, right? But you only ate 3 of them, and the rest you just threw away. And I remember being like, it was like the
pepperoni sandwich.
Yeah, that sandwich, the first strike bar, the actual energy bar, the raspberry ones, like those were amazing. And there's another thing, but then there's like 3 other items. It's like, I don't even know what they were because I never ate them, because I was like, this looks dumb. I'm going to throw that away, and I'm going to only eat the other 3.
All bread, horrible.
Yeah.
It was horrible, man. It was, I remember towards the end of that month, and we got mail, and I didn't get a care package in the mail call that day. And I was like, God damn it, I'm not eating. I just like put a dip in. I was like, I'm not eating another one of those fucking food, meals again. And that's the shenanigans from being over there though. But like, it's funny. It's all relative too, because there's people that are starving that would love to have a first strike.
They would do anything for a first strike.
Yeah, but we're so spoiled as a military that we're like, ugh, that's stupid. It's not like old day wars where you'd have to catch your food from the local like livestock and shit. And like, don't get me wrong. I think there are some units that might have done stuff like that while they were out there. But yeah, man, it's a weird thing. The differences in experience of people's war experience is crazy. And just like I know I have a lot of listeners that are OIF vets that never made it to Afghanistan. Leatherneck is kind of like going to Al-Assad. It's just a massive air base. It's where all the main air people are at, all the higher commands are at. You're like MEF level command and stuff. And it's just there's SUVs, there's police, there's like military police driving around giving people speeding tickets for driving too fast on base.
I was just gonna say that. I remember the MPs, and it was like, aren't you supposed to be guarding the perimeter or something? It's like, why are you giving me a speeding ticket?
No, man. And you know what blew my mind is you have people driving around giving people speeding tickets on base, which, what kind of war are we at where that's what you're doing? You're policing the speed on your base, but whatever. Two, driving around Leatherneck, it was such a huge base. When I would drive the perimeter, I remember like it was like only one out of like 3 or 4 towers were manned. A lot of them just had silhouettes hanging up in the tower, and this was before the Leatherneck attack.
Same thing. I want to mention that. I'm glad you mentioned it, because when we transitioned out of Leatherneck in when we went home in 2011, I went home on Avon in December, and we spent like 3 or 4 days on Leatherneck before we got clearance to go back. Mm-hmm. And I remember the Ivan targets in the towers. And I remember it was a condition 4 base, no magazine inserted. Yep. And I remember it was just this big, huge, lax base. And I remember thinking exactly like, are you freaking serious? This place is going to get attacked. Like, I don't need to be a general or an analyst to tell you, it's like your security posture on this base is garbage. You have these Ivans in the towers. You have no magazines. Nobody knows you're at war here. I just came back from like dodging IEDs in Nawa, and now I'm like told to take out my magazine, and I'm still in Afghanistan in Helmand Province. It's like,
clear your weapon.
Yeah, your security posture is garbage. And then when that attack happened in December of 2012, and Marine base gets attacked, but Prince Harry is okay, and it was like I heard that, and I was like, I could have told you that. I could have told you that a year ago that was going to happen. Yeah. That does not surprise me one little second. I always tell people that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I actually, my old air officer at Anglico was a Harrier pilot. His jet's one of the ones that got blown up. I got to hit him up. I talked to him last year. He was getting ready to move down to San Diego, I think this summer. I need to hit him up and see if he wants to come on the show and talk about that. He'd be a super interesting guy to have come on, because he's gotten to do a lot of work. But yeah, man, Leatherneck, dude, like you said, you can go out on missions and stuff and then come back and go to salsa night, and then go get yourself a nice coffee at Green Bean, and then maybe go watch a movie or something at the movie theater. Yeah. It's like... Yeah.
I had a bicycle.
Yeah, a lot of people. There was a guy, I remember being there. There was a guy with a motorcycle. Some dude, I think he was a contractor, and I think he found parts, and he also ordered a few and built his own motorcycle and would cruise around Leatherneck on like a chopper. It was like this, like blah 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 blah, like he had the fucking big ass handlebars on it and all that stuff. I believe it. I was like, what is this place? Yeah, no. Oh man, that's crazy.
Absolutely.
So but are there any like missions or patrols or anything of note that you want to discuss from your first deployment? Is there anything that stands out that you or anyone that you want to like point out that did good things out there?
I think it was the whole thing stands out. I think the most important thing for me that stands out is because when you're a young guy and it's like you're doing this for real. There's a difference between I think there's a difference between your first deployment and every other deployment after that. The first one is it's like seared into your memory. It's like you can't get rid of it. It's like you cannot because those you form those memories and stuff over it, and you can't get rid of them. Every other deployment, it's like, okay, here we go again, kind of thing, and it's not as seared in your memory as much. And especially if you're, like I was 19, I turned 20 on there. It's just super formative in the life of any young man going through that. And so, everything is super heightened and you just remember things and, going out and working with AUP and having problems with them and working with the local populace and working with the Afghans and, trying to walk around IEDs and at the same time, it's interesting because you mentioned like the whole guys who get back and didn't, they feel like they missed out. For us, for that patrol base, it was not a very kinetic patrol base. There were IEDs all around us. We almost stepped on IEDs, but we never got hit. We never took casualties. Some of the AUP near us got killed one time. But we never got shot, never got blown up. We didn't even get our combat action ribbons. And
really?
Yeah, no, we didn't. Right. So that's something when we come back, and that's something that is, you talk about people who go in the military and they've never deployed and they're like, oh, they have that FOMO about it. Well, we deployed, we went to a combat deployment and we came back and it was this weird, was I even there? I went there, went through all the motions, but
did other guys that did get their combat action ribbons rub it in?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, look at my car and stuff. And the funny thing is with Mama Khan, right? So remember I told you our platoon was split. It was the other half. So it almost felt like luck of the dime, oh, Mama Khan got their car. We didn't get our car, da da da. But when you really dig into Mama Khan, and we found out later, it's like, wait, the real circumstance, the guys at Mama Khan will admit to it. They were like, yeah, the circumstances of that car were not really, they weren't they weren't gunfighter satisfactory kind of thing, because what happened was it was really a fight between the Taliban and these contractors. And the logistics guys, the Taliban were shooting at this convoy, and the Mama Khan guys accidentally got caught up in the middle of it. And then they were
really?
and they were like, oh crap, what's happening? And I think the Taliban, if we could talk to the Taliban participants that day, I almost feel from all the testimony from the Mama Khan guys who talk about it, I almost feel like if we talk to the Taliban side of events that day, they were like, yeah, we started shooting at this convoy and this Marine patrol got in between us and them, and we don't know why. We didn't even want to shoot at them. We were shooting at the convoy. So, and then the Mama Khan guys held that over us, and they were like, Mama Khan, we got ours. They had these hoodies made that were had cars on them, and it was Mama Khan, we got ours kind of thing.
So they're just epic shit talking.
Yeah, and then come to find out later, because those guys were in my platoon, and I'm like, yo, hey man, what actually happened that day? And he was like, dude, it was the biggest crap show ever. That was not car worthy. That wasn't a gunfight that we all valorous, that we came out successful. It's no, we got caught in between them, and that was it. And then one of my buddies, actually the day before that happened, there was this big spider that ended up on his rack, and he was on the top bunk at Mama Khan, and this big spider was in front of him, and he was trying to get out of the way of this spider that was this big, and he was rah, and did this jujitsu move, falls off his rack and slits his hand open on this exposed Hesco that's this, and he slits his hand like that. So his hand is all bloody and crap, so he has to go back to Jaker for stitches, and he misses the firefight. That's the next day, right? So it's just man, what's this? I don't know. It's this conundrum. I don't know.
It's so stupid, man. People put so much weight into that stupid ribbon, that stupid combat action ribbon. And I remember in 13, one of the first time we were out on a mission, we were in vehicles. One of the first times we were out on a mission and we were in vehicles. First time we ever got shot at, it was a couple pot shots, nothing crazy. I don't even think we might have had one guy return fire, maybe. And I remember getting back, and some of the officers were like, well, I think we need to start writing people up for their combat action ribbons and this. And I'm like, really? I'm like, that's what you're going to use? That's the I'm like, bro, we're in Sangin. Give it a couple weeks. Let's at least write it up for something legitimate, that's kind of bullshit. And then after that, they tried to ambush us and stuff. And then, so it was legit. It felt more legitimized, but I was like, you guys are really going to try to write it up for that? For taking a couple shots that hit a side of one vehicle, okay. But that's a lot of it, because guys want to get that ribbon secured because they feel like that validates the time that they were in the military, and anytime they wear their uniform, every other ribbon they have is now justified. It's like
Yeah.
you see guys that have combat action ribbons, and they will look at people that don't have one and go, oh, well, this motherfucker didn't do anything. Like, he's like 20 ribbons for everything else he's ever done in the military. They're like, well, he's missing his car, so fuck
Yeah.
him, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, man, I will take that attitude for people that are like speaking out of turn. You know, people that want to talk about like, this is what combat's going to be like, and, you know, like trying to talk to other people. And it's like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, you don't even know. I will take that kind of attitude then. But I think overall, like, people put way too much weight into that kind of bullshit. And if people just realize that we've all done more than some people and way less than other people, then we could all get along better, because people will ride each other to the point where it's like bullying almost. You know, you're making people mentally like, you know, you're fucking with them because you're just telling them they're pieces of shit because they never got shot at or something like that, you know?
Yeah. And
it's just a crazy world.
Yeah, no, and so no, I'll speak to that point. And I mean, so on the second deployment, like things got very serious, and that was like, okay, yeah, we started taking casualties, and that was, yeah, we got our cars and everything, and it's like, yeah, we did it, so that there's that box checked or whatever. But to your point about like the bullying, like so after the first deployment, I tried out for the scout sniper platoon, and I got in. And I'm surrounded by all these other guys in the platoon, and the sniper platoon on the first deployment, they got because snipers sort of like went wherever they wanted to, and they were like, you know, okay, there's a hot area over here, let's go there. And of course, they would get in their ticks, and they'd get, you know, so they got in a fair amount of action on the first deployment. But I was the only guy in that platoon, and you know, I was facing so much crap. It was like. And it was bad. Like and ironically, the buddies I made in that platoon are some of the best friends I have from the Marine Corps experience, you know, to today.
Yeah.
I'm still in touch with them and stuff. But they gave me so much crap, just like making fun of me and like, they would be like, patrol base Lloyd Clay, like, yeah, out there doing nothing. And I was like, fuck you, man. Fuck you. Like, I just hated them so much at the time. And they, you know, and it was a point of contention for them. And they were like, like, you know, and so that was like a social issue, like in that platoon, kind of thing. But yeah.
It happens, man. It's, if the military does one thing right, it teaches guys how to talk shit to each other. You know what I'm saying? They will take anything that they can, anything that's you have that's like a weakness, they see as a weakness, and they will just, your buddies, you know, your best friends will fucking just sit there and poke at it until they push you too far and you explode on them and stuff like that. It's just it's a weird dynamic, you know, and you're right. Like guys like that, you know, at the time you may be like, fuck this guy, but after a while you become really good friends with them and stuff. And I think after a while, guys joke about it, and it's almost like guys that joke about, you know, fuck, oh, I poke, hey, what's up, you fucking poke, you know. Yeah. Only the idiots take that seriously, you know. Only the people that have like light experience take that seriously, because I think a lot of the infantrymen I know, they're like, dude, you're doing the same. You're out here with us, like you're a pogue, but you're fucking, you know, like I'd rather have the JTAC out here with us than not have a JTAC. You know what I'm saying? Like that you're an asset and stuff like that. And I think the same thing with the combat action ribbon. It's just such a ridiculous argument that some people get in, and then like you said, then when you start digging into some people, you find out, you know, some of the reasoning behind how they got it and stuff, and it becomes it's all ridiculous. I think our reward system's kind of fucked up that way, but I don't know, man. I don't know. So let's talk about like I told you before, I usually try to stop around the 2-hour mark, so let's get into your time between your two deployments. We'll talk about the incident, the mortar incident and stuff like that, and then we'll kind of pause it there. Maybe we'll set up a second interview and have you come back on, talk about that second deployment, and get into more detail about your book, because your book will be out by then too. So so after you got back from that deployment, what was like the homecoming like? You know, this is your first deployment. You are someone I feel like appreciates the moment. You know, you appreciate the. You know, it's a whole thing. You know, it's not just there's meaning behind it, and I think you know someone that reads military history and studies it, and you understand I feel like you understand the feelings and stuff that people have. So for you, what was it like when you came back and it was like, holy shit, this is my coming home from war moment?
Yeah, so it was and it wasn't at the same time, because it was like. I had reached that weird point in my life. I was like, wow, I can actually like identify with the people I've been reading about, like
Mm-hmm.
obsessively. It's like I've been in their shoes now. Like I've done that. And that point was like very is like amazing to me like that. But at the same time, there was still that lack of combat, right? So there was still
Mm-hmm.
like, but what did I do?
Do you
Like
feel like a liar coming home?
I didn't feel like a liar because I mean I would tell people like, yeah, we deployed and I didn't get shot at and I didn't shoot it, I didn't use my weapon and da da da. Like I wouldn't like I didn't lie about it. I would tell people and I would be like, yeah, we did this, but nothing happened. So I would always preface it with that kind of thing. And I feel like it was like, my solemn responsibility to like tell people that. Like I wasn't going to tell people like, yeah, I was on combat deployment, da da da. It's like, yeah, well, what do you do? It's like, actually not much, like it was a weird juxtaposition that way, right? And I'll tell you what, another thing though is that I started going down this like slippery slope of this sort of and it started with that deployment and it started with that frustration from like the lack of combat, but
Mm-hmm.
it turned into this weird like terminal land slippery slope where I started just hating everything about the rear because I even though there's not much combat, I loved that. I loved being there. I loved being in that patrol base. I loved patrolling. I loved, practicing posture and working with the Afghan police and talking with the Afghan people. Like it just felt like so like I unlocked a part of myself I didn't even know exists. And I loved that feeling so much. But then when I came back to the US, it's like everything I hated about Lejeune and about the training and stuff, everything just accentuated because I loved what I had been in before. So I turned into this like really weird state where it was just this slippery, greasy slope of being like, it was that terminal lance attitude coupled with like, I don't understand what we're doing back in the rear. I don't understand why we're doing all these different field ops and all this different training. It's like nothing I do here correlates to what I did over there. So I don't understand why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it really led to this weird depression that I went into between my deployments. And it began and it started with so like I got off the first deployment. I got put in the armory actually as an armor custodian because the company commander or the company XO actually my buddy screwed me over because he went to him at like Jaker and he was like, hey, yeah, I'm not gonna say his name, but he was like, hey man, it was the gunny. No, it was the Lieutenant Haft. He was the weapons platoon commander and he was like, "Hey, like I want to put you in as armory custodian. We need someone competent in the armory because the previous like the armory wasn't functional, man. It just wasn't working." And he asked him like, "Hey, can you go in there?" And my buddy was like, "Oh no, sir, I can't go. I can't do that. Like, I'll like blow my brains out if I go in there." And the lieutenant actually liked him, and he was like, "Oh, so you don't want to do it? Okay, so who do you think would work really well in there?" He was like, "Oh, you should put in there. You should put in Vining. You should put in my buddy Vining. Like, I know him really well. Like, he loves guns. He'll
He's a
love
competent
in
individual.
there." Pretty much. And so I just get voluntold to go in there, right? And I didn't want to go in there. I hated it. And but my first sergeant actually told me, he was like, he's a classical statement, right? He was like, "Hey, Vining, so because here's the thing, I left early on the deployment because I had to go advon to go with the armory to check in everyone back in the rear when everyone came back, right?"
Hmm.
And I was paired with the new armory. The guy in charge of the armory was this guy. I probably shouldn't say his name, but I won't say his name, but he was like this super toxic, racist, like really just hard individual to work with. I did not like
Hmm.
working with him at all. It was very hard. Everyone had issues working with him. He was a good Marine in terms of proficiency. He was responsible. He was hardworking and all this stuff. But he was just like,
Just a shitty person.
yeah, just like toxic and saying the N word and all sorts of stuff. Like,
Really?
yeah, just racist and toxic. And you just did not want to be around him. And I hated working for him. I hated it. And so, no, I hated working for him. That was horrible. I hated being in the armory because it's like, are you freaking kidding me? I'm an 0311. Like, I signed up to be a grunt. I'm in the field. I signed up to put bullets in bodies, man. I didn't sign up to put rifles on racks. Like, are you freaking kidding me? I,
Hand rifles out the window.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, I loved guns. And this is the thing is, I loved guns. I was totally into guns, infatuated with small arms. And we just talked about the M27. But when you're around them in that armory setting, they cease to have meaning and interest. They're just like, in fact, they're the opposite. It's like, crap, we have to get done with this site count and this EDL at the end of the day. We don't know where one M9 is. We don't know where one PEC 16 is. Freak out mode, count everything 10 times over, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So anyways, I was in that and I had to go home early and I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, why are you taking, like, you're ripping me from my brothers, like from my guys at Loy Calais. I was like, I love those guys, man. It's like, I would die for them any day of the week. And we still have like 3 weeks on the deployment. It's like, and you're ripping me from them. It's like, no, they need me. I need to be there. I need to be with them. I don't need to be in the stupid armory. So I mean, our first sergeant Handball, I remember he asked me, it was like, so like Lance Corporal Vining, like, what do you feel about going to the armory? And I literally said to him, I was like, well, first sergeant, I don't really like it. Like this isn't what I signed up to do. And he said, and what did he say? He said, well, Vining, you signed up to be a Marine, right? And I was like, yes, first sergeant, you're right. You know, it's like, I can't say anything, right? So anyways, I was in the armory and I hated it. I hated it so much. I hated the condition. I didn't like working there. I didn't like working for the guy that I was under, this really toxic, racist person. I didn't like working for him, and I always wanted to be in snipers. Right. That was always one of my goals from when I enlisted. I was like, I want to be a scout sniper. I want to do Carlos Hathcock kind of stuff. I want to do it. Mm-hmm. And the sniper indoc came up, right? And I was like, that's my way out. You know, it's like, not only is it to do something that I want to do, but it's to get out of this freaking situation that I'm in right now. I cannot stand it in the armory working for this guy. And the sniper indoc came up, and he didn't have a problem. Like, that guy did not have a problem letting me go for the indoc. I mean, I think maybe it wasn't mutual. I definitely hated working for him more than he hated me working under him, but he didn't. I wouldn't want him to write like my pros and cons. Let's just leave it at that, you know. So indoc happened, and I got into snipers, and I love snipers. I loved it a lot. It was a great time because I was learning new things, working on the rifles. It was almost like, I'll say it was sort of like a collegiate, like varsity level. Like if the infantry was sort of like the JV. And, you know, it's like you're exposed to everything. You could do everything kind of well. But in snipers, it's like you took it to a whole nother level. So instead of, planning a fire plan sketch, you're doing your 3D modeling of the whole freaking environment in front of you. And you're calling out these TRPs and everything, just as an example. And with shooting, like everything you do, it's just that much harder. And that you have to be that much more into it. And most of the guys in snipers, they were all hyper competitive, right? And it kind of creates this environment where everyone wants to outdo each other in the same platoon. And that's actually a great feeling in the fleet, because you come from a line platoon and it's kind of like, you know, you have people that are top performers, you have people that are garbage, you have everyone else who's kind of in between, you know, and you have to deal with that every day. It's like, well, you know, who are the guys who are going to lag behind on the runs? Who are the guys that are, you know, trying to get promoted kind of thing? But in snipers, it was the opposite. Everyone was a top performer. You had to be a top performer to be in that platoon. So that was really cool to be surrounded by, because you're surrounded by like hyper competitive, really smart individuals and really fit guys, and everyone's like trying to, like, you know, push it to the max kind of thing. And that was really cool to be in, compared to the line company where it's like, blah, sometimes.
It's a completely different lifestyle when you're around people that want to be there. You know, people that, well, I think the added seriousness of the job, you know, of knowing, like, one, the legacy of the Scout Sniper program in the Marine Corps is obviously, like, you know, it's just something that's just, it's kind of known. You know, that's a huge deal that the Marine Corps is known for their Scout Snipers. And I think people, you know, I was never in one of those platoons or anything like that, but I assume that people that are in those platoons kind of appreciate that legacy and want to keep that going strong. And like you said, that small team, that small element of people, top performing people that just want to be there, you know, it makes the whole experience even better, because you might not be as good as some of these people, but you're being as good as you can, or you're bettering yourself because you're forced to, because you're surrounded by all these awesome people. I had a similar experience when I got to Anglico. You know, that was like the the drive of the people that were on the teams themselves, you know, they're just happy to be on the teams, and they know that their spot on the teams could get moved if they don't perform.
Yes.
So the people are out there performing and trying to be good at their job and stuff like that. And also because the teams are small and they have their own specialized missions and stuff, the unit was, you know, super flexible with the training and stuff like that. And I don't know how it was with you guys in your sniper platoon, but you know, that flexibility and training and almost like the big boy rules where you as a corporal have an actual say in what's happening and you can have some input that's actually, you know, you feel like it's actually being listened to and appreciated. It's just such a good environment, man. That's why these small team elements, that's why you hear these guys talk about the camaraderie that they build in these small teams. Same with my advisor team. You know, it was a small group of guys and we all went to singing together and we, you know, it was like, those are guys that, I don't know, you just stand out better. You just do, I think it forces you to become a better person, especially when you're like one of one. You know, there's not very many JTACs out there, so it's like you have to perform. You know, in my case, it was like you have to be good because who else is going to fucking do it? You know, kind of deal. So
no, exactly, and so no, I'll tell you the problem though is that I was telling you earlier about that sort of just terminal Lance hating everything mindset, and that was partly due to the armory and stuff. But then I got into snipers, and for the first couple months, like a bunch of months in snipers, it was. You know, it was like a complete change. I was like, wow, this is great. I'm loving this. I'm going to get a school spot. You know, I'm doing field ops with these guys, But, you know, something happened where it just this weird part of me sort of crept back in. And because of that sort of hyper competitive atmosphere, there's this sort of dog eat dog and cliques and everyone's like stepping down on each other because well, I mean, if you're a pig and you can step down on someone else and make them look like crap, like you're going to go to school ahead of them kind of thing. So that's an aspect of it there. But honestly...
You want to explain what a pig is for the non-layman?
Yeah, so, I mean, just going into this crazy... Yeah, but just going into this whole atmosphere of the sniper platoon, you have pigs and you have hogs, hunters of gunmen, and professionally instructed gunmen. And pigs are, you know, scum of the earth. You're there... to like get, you know, to serve the hogs, so to speak. And the hogs are like, those are the snipers, those are the team leaders, those are the guys who are calling the shots, literally. And the pigs are non-school trained guys. And the misconception is that, well, you know, the hogs are better than the pigs. And it's like, that can be the case, but you've got pigs who can outshoot, outmaneuver, outstock, outwork hogs any day of the week. You know, so it's not a black and white world where it's like the school trained scout snipers are the best guys in the world. It's like, no, you'll have guys in this team who are actually better and more competent than the school trained scout snipers, you know, and it just works out that way because you get better individuals that come in. Only difference is they just haven't been to school yet, you know, and that's a huge deal in the sniper community is you have to go to school. And then you become, you know, the hog and you get a hog's tooth and stuff. And that's huge.
And it's hard to get to school, correct? The school seats are very limited?
It is. And you have to, well, it depends on the unit and depends on the manpower and depends on the needs and everything. Because you'll get slots for deployments and then for the platoon and stuff. For me, I almost had a guaranteed slot because this platoon was just so small. We didn't have enough guys. So it was like, well, we only have one slot. We can only send one person, right? So there's a couple other guys who went before me, and that's the thing. They put in their time. They've been on their deployment as a pig. You know, they were competent. You know, they were incompetent in the platoon and stuff. Hold on a second. What's up? Yes, it's that room up there. Yes. Just knock on the door. No, there isn't. There's no one there now.
I picked it and there's somebody sleeping.
Really?
Yeah.
You can wake him up. Just let him know that. Let him know, and he'll tell you if that's okay or not. He'll be all right. He's almost awake too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So wait like 5-10 minutes. I got some shit to check out how bad.
You can do that if you want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Oh, the plumber just came in. But those guys, like, they had their school spots before me, and then they went to school, and all of them passed actually. And then I was just like waiting. So I'm just sitting there, you know, in the barracks and waiting for them to, you know, they're in school and I'm getting feedback on stuff from them. But yeah, no. What else did you want to ask about that?
Oh, I just wanted you to point out like what the difference between the hog and the pig was for the people that weren't aware of how the sniper platoon works and stuff like that. And you said that they did their time as pigs and that they had done a deployment. Was that kind of just to kind of relate it to my own experience in 2010, I think, when they started letting sergeants go to TCP school to become JTACs. But however, I was a lat mover. I was motor T when I first came in, did 3 years of that. When you lat move, when I got to 10th Marines, and I don't know if it was only a 10th Marines thing or if it was something elsewhere, but they wouldn't let you go to TCP school or screen for TCP school as a sergeant until you had done a deployment as a scout, as an 0861 forward observer, doing the regular work. And then when you came back, which I got that. I was kind of like, this sucks. I had to go do a deployment first, but I got it because then you get a better full understanding of like the job and stuff like that before you go to the schoolhouse and you learn all these new skills. Is it the same kind of way with your pigs and hogs? Like, did they want you to do a deployment as a pig first? Is that a requirement, or is that something that it's just a nice to have?
Yeah, no, 99% of the time, yeah, you really need that deployment before you go as a pig. There are guys who have been to school who have not deployed. There were some in the basic course that I went to at the Scout Sniper School. There were guys who had not deployed. They do exist. They do come through. But that they are like the 5% that do go through. All right.
Okay.
But most people do deploy. But here, the difference though is that in your situation, right? I think that was like that was like an admin thing. It was like, no, you have to have deployed, to go to this school kind of thing. That was like organizationally chartered, right?
Maybe. Well, I mean, I think it was a decision at the leadership. It wasn't anything that was official. It was like an informal, like, this is what you have to do. Because when I actually got back from my deployment in 2011 with 3-6, that's when they told me, like, hey, we want you to go to TCP school. Now you got to go through the primer course, which is like the course you do that's 2 weeks long before you go to TCP school.
Yeah. And
when I jumped into that course, I was actually a standby because I had just gotten back from deployment. So there were 2 other guys that were going to go to TCP school as well. And one of them, our Master Sergeant German, who is the instructor at the time. You probably don't know who he is, but he's a legendary 0861 fire support man on the East Coast.
Okay.
He's one of those guys that if you didn't know your job, he's gonna let you know that he's not happy that you don't know your job, especially as a sergeant 0861.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that was gonna go to TCP school kept fucking up during the primers and went from like planning on re-enlisting, going to TCP school to like, hey, I'm getting out. Like after a week of getting berated by Master Sergeant German, he's like, I'm getting out. Top German looks at me, he's like, Kramer, you ready to go to school? And I'm like, fuck yeah, let's do it, Top. Let's go. And the other guy I actually ended up going to school with, he was also a lab mover, but he had not done a deployment as an 0861.
Yeah.
But the needs of the Marine Corps at the time were like, dude, we need JTACs for these deployments. Like JTAC's one of those jobs that everybody wants one around, and there's just not enough of us to go around. So I was kind of butthurt because I was like, dude, I just had to do a fucking deployment as a 6-1, as a fires chief before I could go to TCP school. And now you're getting to go without it, but
yeah,
it's all good. He's good people, but it wasn't I don't think it was an official thing, and maybe it was, and maybe it changed at some point, but it was like hey, you have to go and like learn these skills. A lot of the sergeants went, if you were a lab mover, they sent them to an infantry company, and you would go as a scout out with the line companies, which normally as an 0861 is a lance corporal or corporal's job. That's like that's like your first job as an 0861 is to get attached to an infantry unit for deployment and be the forward observer out on patrols and stuff like that. It's not a sergeant's job, but because we had so many lap movers at the time, a lot of people get out of the 0861 field because it's such a high tempo. There are a lot of field ops. There's a lot of training. Especially if you go become a JTAC, it even ramps up even more. So there's always guys getting out, and there's always lab movers there. So yeah, I don't know. It's during the war. There's all kinds of shit that happens to make things work and stuff like that. But
yeah.
So did you actually make it to the schoolhouse then?
Yeah, no, I went to the basic course, and in when was it? It was like November. Yeah, it was November, October of 2012. November, October of 2012. I did it, man. It was kind of like, it's kind of like the magic, like the prophecy that everyone wants to attain. It's like I did it. I was there. I was in the platoon for a year. I got a seat at the schoolhouse, and I went to school, and I actually did it. And it was like, wow, the unattainable is within reach, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to school, and I pass, the PFT that they have, like they weed a bunch of people out there, and they just go right into land nav.
Really? On the PFT?
There's some guys that got weeded out there, yeah, because they see it as a selection. So when people show up to take the entrance of the PFT, it's like you better be getting top scores in this thing, or it's like we need to like drop some packs kind of deal. So there's guys who go. In fact, there's a guy there, there's a guy who went to the schoolhouse after me from our platoon, and he didn't make it past the PFT.
That's gotta be tough to come back to your unit and tell them that you didn't get a high enough score on your physical fitness test to fucking continue on. Jesus.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was like, so that'll alleviate this. But so anyways, I passed that, start some of the basic classes, do land nav, and I couldn't pass land nav. We did three. You get 3 attempts, and I did 3 attempts, and I got 3 points on every attempt, and you're supposed to get 4. So talk about like a blue balls moment, right?
Yeah, man, that's tough. So you got dropped for land nav, huh?
Yeah. Me along with like 2 other guys. No, me and along with I think it was 2 other guys. And that's typical. That is typical for the scout sniper for the land nav section. Like guys get dropped for land nav all the time.
Is that something? So if that's something that occurs, like if you're dropping people all the time for land nav, do you guys practice land nav a lot?
Yeah, and to be honest, like if I could go back in time, and if I could have done more on my own, I would absolutely have. I would have put in more prep work. I would have done more land nav for sure. We did some, but it wasn't. For me, it wasn't enough, and I'm not gonna blame the platoon like you guys didn't train me enough for school. It's like because you can't like it's a holistic effort, right? You can't totally train for land nav because now your PT scores are going to be messed up, or your stalking is going to be messed up, or on the range you're not going to shoot well with the M40s, or your comm isn't going to be good, and you need to memorize your terms. I mean, for school, it's like the whole scout sniper community is this weird like cult fellowship, and it's like you got to be able to spit definitions and ditties out just like at boot camp. I mean, definition of a scout sniper: a scout sniper is a Marine highly skilled in field crafted marksmanship who can deliver well-trained well-aimed precision fires on the enemy, in support of combat operations. It's like those definitions, you got to be able to spit them right there, and it's like it's almost like boot camp all over again. We have to memorize stuff like first focal plane, second focal plane, parallax adjustments, windage, elevation. It's like that stuff has to be there in the back of your mind, like boom, like you don't even have to think about it. So in the lead up to school, like there's all these areas that you have to study, and you can't just be like a land nav boss, although you really should be, but because you have to pay attention to all these other things. So it's like, great, you'll pass land nav the first time. It's like, well, are you proficient with an M40? Are you proficient with this? Because the thing with the schoolhouse is that like because you come from a platoon of preparation and usually guys are in for deployment, so it's like the school is like it's like a finishing course, like what do you call it, like a gentleman's course kind of thing. It's like, no, you're not going to school to learn this stuff. You're going to school to get tested in this stuff. You already need to know this stuff. You already need to be able to call for fire. You already need to be able to, plan and shoot your moving targets out to 600 meters, range S your movers. You already need to do all this stuff. The schoolhouse is like, okay, good. You know how to do it. Roger that. Here's some extra tips and tricks to help you with that stuff. You don't go to school to learn how to be a scout sniper. You are already in essence a sniper before you go to school, because your platoon is just training and prepping and working on this stuff to the level of like cult status of like, knowing your definitions and knowing all this stuff. So
which school did you go to? Did you go to the one in Quantico?
No, I went to the one in Geiger.
There's a
no,
I didn't even know there was
Stones Bay. No, wait. I'm getting in. Oh, so okay, it's on Geiger, but most of the stuff you do is all the shooting package that you do is on Stones Bay. Yeah, it's the Geiger Schoolhouse. It's part of the Advanced Infantry Training Battalion at Geiger.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought the East Coast Scout Sniper School was at Quantico. I guess I had that wrong.
No, no,
I
no.
do remember seeing out at Stone Bay though the snipers running around, the guys that were going through school.
Yeah.
I seen them I'm coming in. Everyone hates going to the rifle range out there because you got to be there like 4 a.m, to get to the armory there to get your weapon and stuff like that. And I remember coming in at like 4 a.m. and seeing some dude in a ghillie suit, like doing this slow, like half jog, trudging down the road. I'm like, that dude is miserable right now. I was like, that looks shitty.
Yes.
I was like, I can't even be upset about what I'm doing right now because that's who knows how long he's been doing it. He's already beat. It's 4 a.m, and he's maybe he hasn't even slept yet.
Do you know what? Do you know where he was going? I guarantee you where he was going. He was going from the barracks at Stones Bay where we slept, because you sleep there during the shooting quals and stuff. You go from there. You get your rifle at the Stones Bay Armory. You pull, because we actually take the rifles over from Geiger to from Lejeune, because so for some of the sniper platoons we'll actually bring our own units rifles from Lejeune, check them into the schoolhouse either at Geiger or at Stones Bay. So I bet he put on his ghillie, checked out his 40 at the armory, and then he was jogging down to Hathcock Range, which is the last range on that lineup of ranges at Stones Bay.
Yeah.
So
yeah, man, that's land nav is tough. That's one of those things that I think a lot of guys get it or they don't. Reading a map, reading contour lines, understanding. It's really tough too to be at Lejeune and try to practice it because Lejeune is super flat. There's really no terrain features. So it's kind of an unfair way to do it. You really need to be out at like Pendleton or 29 Palms or something like that and get in the terrain and stuff. But for me, I think the best way people can practice outside of the military is just go hiking on the weekend. Find a state forest or national forest. Get a map. They have maps for all of them at like REI and shit like that. And get a compass and just go out and navigate through the woods on some of the trails and stuff like that. That's how you learn land nav. It's just one of those things you got to once you can figure out contour lines, once you and you can look at a map and imagine what the terrain actually looks like. That makes it so much easier, and then obviously the 2-point resections and shit like that to find your own location and stuff is obviously hard and takes its own practice. But yeah, that's something you got to do on your own time. I don't think you can no one's ever really doing land nav enough in the military. I don't think there's ever enough just practice, especially nighttime land nav.
No, and that's the thing with the Scout Sniper land nav. It's like it's a man's course. Like you start at 3 a.m. and you end at noon. You have to get at minimum 4 points. There's no way you're going to wait out the night and then get your points in the day. It's like, no, you start at 3 a.m, you get your points, and then you just roll into the day kind of thing. And it's like,
how far away were the points?
You had different cards, and some were as far away as like 5 to 8 kilometers from each other. And then some, like, it depended on the card. If you got lucky, you could get them, because the land nav we did was at that airfield, that abandoned airfield. On
Geiger?
No,
or not Geiger.
It was Lejeune. It was like by the tank tracks area, and there's this abandoned airfield. I forgot the name of it.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but you go out there and you do it, and you're running. You are running from point to point, and it's like it was interesting because like there's all sorts of little tips and tricks you can do. Like for example, one guy, I think one of the best things I ever saw was this one guy took a map of Lejeune, and he took it because they were all 150,000, and he got it it was either 150,000 or 125,000, and he got it blown up to like 115 or 110,000 at a Kinko's in Jacksonville.
Oh, really?
That's the smartest thing I've ever thought of, because you just reduced your margin of error down to half. Because now you're working off of like 110,000 maps, whereas before you had 125,000 that you had to plot off of, right? And then other things you would do is like, for example, because you have to have water, right? So you have to have like 4 canteens of water, and that's required to set out. They have to be full. Well, what some guys would do is like, okay, you'd show the instructors your full water or whatever, but the second you'd start running to your nearest point, you dump your water. Because like you don't need water. Maybe you need like half a canteen of water because you only need to last like 6 or 7 hours in the boonies, and then to get your points and then come back. You don't your goal in life right now is to get those points, not the hydrates. Hydration can wait.
Yeah, you're carrying water. That water is weight.
Exactly. So the idea was, you dump your water after you start running. So now you just lost the weight that would have otherwise hindered you. So stuff like that. And there's all little tips and tricks to help you with that kind of thing. Some guys would take like freaking searchlights, because you're supposed to have a headlamp, but that's
Mm-hmm.
useless at night. So one guy named Klingeman in our platoon, he was like, because he knew he was this his second attempt going through school.
Oh,
And he was like, I'm not messing around on land nav. I have to pass it. And so he took this huge like Walmart searchlight. It was just like a lens that was like 6 inches long and holding it with a grip. And he's out there at night like searching for his point with this freaking thing. I was like, you do you, man. He passed. So
that's funny,
yeah,
man.
yeah.
Well, hey man, we're I think we're right at. I know we took a break there for a second, so I think we're right around 2 hours. So I think I'm going to start wrapping it up. Did want to mention your book is Into Helmand with the Walking Dead: A Story of Marine Corps Combat in Afghanistan. That's on pre-order now on Amazon. Or is it available other places as well?
It is available. I think Walmart has a page, Casemate, the publisher, has a page, but the easiest is probably Amazon. I'm going to set up a way so if you want an autograph copy, that I can buy the books at a reduced price. Then I'm going to sell them on my own, but you can get them autographed. And a lot of my family members and guys who I served with, like that, they would be interested in something like that. But yeah, no, it's available there right now. It'll come out in a couple weeks.
Yeah, it comes out on October 21st, correct?
Yeah,
Is that the right date? Yep. So
yeah.
October 21st, people can pick that up, pre-order now on one of those websites, and I'll have you come back on the book comes out. I'll take a read, I'll take a look at it, read over it, and we'll discuss the book next time. We'll discuss the firing incident with the mortars. We talked about it. I talked about it with somebody the other day or a couple weeks ago. I feel bad. Like I want to reference back to the specific people I talked to these things about,
Yeah.
but you're the 80th podcast I've done, so it's all kind of starting to blend together, and I feel bad when I forget,
Oh, no
or I
worries.
miss. Yeah, so I've talked about it before with other people. I think with Gunner Carr, maybe it was who I talked. I can't remember exactly, but what a crazy incident, man! And it's very unfortunate, and I think it's something that I don't know. It's just one of those accidents that happen in the military that you just don't think is going to happen, and then when it does, you're like, "What the fuck?" And then how could it have been as tragic as it was? So it'll be interesting to hear from somebody that was actually with the unit at the time, and get that story, and then also talk more about your second deployment and what you've done since then. Your Instagram page is the Sila Report. I kind of flipped through that a little bit. If you
Oh,
want to take a minute or two and talk through that, because it looks like you're just really into weapons, and you do like a like
yeah.
a breakdown of different types of weapons and stuff, and I think that's actually really interesting.
So Silah report,
Sila.
yeah, it means the word Silah means weapon in Arabic, Turkish, Farsi, Dari, and Wusla in Pashto, and also Wusla Islaha in Urdu as well. And Ceylon Report was really born out of me being interested in small arms, and I was also interested in because I was also interested in Pashto and Dari in Afghanistan, and I went to school for that when I got out. I got my degree in Central Eurasian Studies at Indiana University, and I was really fascinated by this sort of intersection of where the history of small arms usage and development technology exists in the Middle East and North Africa and Central Asia, and there's this the history of small arms in these areas, and I found there's this area that people weren't really getting, because you'd see gun guys who knew about the guns in these regions, but then you'd ask like, okay, well, how'd that G3 get there, or why was Iran using G3s, or why was this gun popular with the Taliban or the Mujahideen, and they can't answer the question, because you have to be looking at primary sources, you have to be working in these languages, you have to actually talk to the people that are using them, the indigenous forces that are there. And you had the other side of the factor, which was people who understood the socioeconomic problems and geopolitical issues and religious problems and the history and the context. They understood that, but the guns weren't there because these two communities weren't talking to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because like you're not gonna get like an Iranian professor at Indiana to look at a bunch of AKs in use by the Hashishabi in Iraq. It's like it's not gonna happen. So my point was that I'm naturally interested in both of these things. So I created Silaf Report with my friend Hiracha, who's in Armenia right now, and Nagorno-Karabakh, and
Oh man.
everything that's happening there, blowing up. Like he could be called up right now and as a reservist. But I created Cpl Report as an area where the two come together, and where we look at small arms from the region, the history, the technology, the use, the development, and we look at it through the lens of the indigenous and the local perspective with the primary sources. And we're putting them together, and we're looking like, well, this is the histories of some of these, and look at sort of the rich history and some of the developments and how the different nations worked with each other and how proxy forces used each other, and stuff like the Krinkov in Afghanistan, and looking at that kind of thing from that angle. And we had a lot of fun with it. I've really loved it so far. Right now we've got a team working. I mean, we've got a couple of guys writing about various articles about things. I mean, we'll go into stuff like the symbology of crests in the Syrian civil war. We have like a 3 or 4 part article series by this guy named Omar, who's great. And he looks at crests in symbology. And it's like, well, why do some groups, whether it's the FSA, whether it's the YPG, the Syrian army, ISIS affiliated groups, why do they choose certain small arms in their crests to depict how they want to present themselves in both Syria and to the rest of the world? It's like, why do they pick some guns over others? And what are those guns? And it's like, why does, some groups in Syria actually have like a Winchester, like Model 77, just like lever action right there. It's like, how do you explain that? And that's what we try to do at Cpl Report, is look at that stuff. So
that's awesome, man. Well, hopefully we'll get into more of that on the next podcast, or maybe we'll just have to schedule a few down the road to cover all these topics, because it sounds like we're both we both have a lot of information that we bounce off each other. So it's been a really good conversation. Thanks again for coming on the show, man. And for the listeners, again, that's Into Helmand with The Walking Dead, a story of Marine Corps combat in Afghanistan. That'll be available October 21st. You can pre-order now, help them out, and do those pre-order sales, because that obviously helps out the book sales and stuff total, and brings it up in the rankings and stuff, and to get the notice out there. Thanks again, man. And go ahead.
I also want to mention that the book Into Helmand with The Walking Dead, it's not just me. It's also my co-author, Kevin Schranz, who is not alive to see the book getting pre-ordered and sold. He killed himself in September of 2015. And we've got about 20 pages from a book that he was writing. And I'm working very closely with his widow, Abby, and we've been working since then. It's like, it's not just my story, but it's also his story, and sort of getting into, suicide and tragedy and PTSD and stuff like that. So this is not really, it's kind of for me, but it's also for him. And I want to I want to throw his name out there every single chance I can get when talking about the book.
For sure, man. I appreciate you bringing that part of it up. It's just unfortunate, man. That's one of those things that just touches every facet. It seems like we all know multiple people that have done that, have committed suicide or something like that. And I don't know the circumstances or anything, but maybe if you want to talk about it next time or whatever, we can. But it's just unfortunate. Appreciate you, bringing that up to clarify and everything like that. And again, like I said, everyone make sure to check that out. And yeah, man, well, thanks again for coming on the podcast. Everyone, check out my Instagram page at Former Action Guys and at JKramer Graphics. And my website is at jkramergraphics.com. Yeah, pick up a sticker or something cool. And if nothing else, I guess I'll see you guys next week.